believe we have everyone here from the committee. So I'd like to, Mr. McCauley, if I could just have some opening remarks, and then I'll get back to you if that's all right with you. First, welcome to everyone. Glad to see you and Madam Ratanzi after Mr. McCauley. I'm glad to see you back here. Good to see you. I was hoping we wouldn't see each other until September, but obviously this is a very important day for us. I want to remind all members that this is a special meeting requested through Standing Order 106 Sub 4, and this is also televised. I would like to spend just a couple of moments going over some procedural aspects of the meeting and how this meeting will be conducted, and then we'll get into the meeting itself. Unlike our regular committee meeting, which is structured for 2 hours and only 2 hours, this special meeting has no predetermined adjournment time. Therefore, we will be sitting as long as members around this table have questions or comments to make. We will adjourn only when all members have exhausted all of their questions, comments, or observations. Now, the first order of business that we'll be conducting is we need to agree, if this meeting is to continue, we need to agree as a committee that we wish to examine the Phoenix pay system. That was included in the letter of request under sub 106 sub 4, but we have to agree at this table that we want to go forward and examine the Phoenix pay system. Then and only then will this meeting continue. Now, we all know that Mr. Weir, for an example, has a motion on notice that is talking about potential witnesses. I suspect, although I do not know, I suspect there will be other motions coming from the floor. You can make a motion from the floor that is admissible if there are motions pertaining to witnesses to come forward. We have a number of officials in the gallery today, and I just want to, for your benefit, committee members, and perhaps for the members of the media who are in attendance, let you know who will be in the gallery today and would be available if requested to come forward to speak to this committee. We have Donna Lackey, who's the National President, Government Services Union, Marie LeMay, the Deputy Minister, Public Services and Procurement, Rosanna Di Paola, and I'm probably butchered that name, my apologies, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister, Accounting, Banking and Compensation, Gavin Liddy, Associate Deputy Minister, and also Debbie, I think it's Davian, President, Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada. These officials are in the audience. If any of them are requested to come forward, they will be available if the committee so agrees. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if a motion is presented, debate will begin on that motion. The normal rules of procedure will take place. That is to say that there is no time limit for debate, and speakers can speak more than once. However, as a chair, I would encourage you to please make your comments as succinct as possible. The longer we are debating motions, the longer it would take to potentially have witnesses before us. I think in the cases of motions that are requesting certain witnesses to appear, the witnesses requested will probably be fairly self-apparent as to why they are being asked to appear, so I don't believe we need to spend an awful lot of time on debate, but that is strictly up to the members around this committee. Also, I would strongly encourage members to try and avoid, if possible, the blame game. And I say this with all sincerity. We're all partisan animals around here, and we can all go out and we can do our partisan hits with the media. But the reality is this is a serious, serious problem. The aggrieved parties are the employees of the federal government. And I think it serves no useful purpose for members of this committee to start blaming one another, who did what, when did they do it. I hope that we are of one mind, and the purpose of this meeting is to certainly determine what went wrong, but more importantly, what are the remedies to fix the problems. And if we can focus on that, then hopefully we can all be part of the solution. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, on a separate matter, after we conclude the meeting, the special meeting, I would ask concurrence of the members around this table for an in-camera 5-minute meeting so our clerk can update us on future committee business. Now, that concludes my opening remarks, and Mr. McCauley and Mr. Weir, you're on the speakers list. I had recognized you first.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your comments. I'd like to put forward a motion that the Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada appear before the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates no later than August 5th, 2016, on the issue of the government's failure to adequately implement the Phoenix pay system. and that the meeting be televised.
That concludes your motion?
Yes.
The motion is now up for debate, and I will we'll assemble the speakers list. Mr. McCauley, you had made the motion, so I'll ask you to speak to it. If you could, briefly, please.
Just very briefly, the Minister of Public Services Procurement is responsible for the Phoenix Pay System. It is her department that is responsible for rolling out, looking after it. I think it's imperative that we have her here to discuss it with us, explain her plans on fixing the system and how we're going to go forward with that.
Thank you, Mr. McCauley. Madame Ratanzi?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. McCauley's motion is not unreasonable, but we have to be mindful that we have the Deputy Minister here today, and our motion on July the 25th, the letter that we sent, we have asked the Deputy Minister to come. We need to hear first from the Deputy Minister as to what solutions have been. We know the problems. There are plenty of people who have not been paid. And so we can hear from the people, who are working, the bureaucrats that are working, and then we can hear from the minister later on in September, because we need to figure out as a committee the time frame. We have other issues that we are working on, so we need to work with first the Deputy Minister, figure out what it is, and then as a committee come up with a solid plan. I do not dispute that the minister has to come, but the minister coming will give the same answers as the Deputy Minister will not help our case. So I think it is important that if we want to solve this problem and not play political games, then we should get to listen to the Deputy Minister and then move forward. Thank you.
Madam Ratanzi, before I go to Mr. Weir, I'm sure you're aware of this, you mentioned the motion that you had contained in your letter. The motion will have to be presented today.
Do you wish me to present the motion now?
No, we're dealing with Mr. McCauley's, but before we can deal with what you would like to see, we would have to have that motion presented.
Fair enough.
Mr. Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would speak in favor of the motion. I think it's self-evident that we need to hear from the minister on the Phoenix pay system. I would note that the reason we're here today is we recognize that this is an urgent crisis. So I would disagree with Madame Ratanzi that it would be reasonable to wait until September to hear from the minister. In fact, I would note that the minister is in Ottawa today. And I wonder, Mr. Chair, if we might be able to ask her to testify to our committee this afternoon. I think if you were to canvass my Conservative colleagues, they would agree that if possible, that would be quite desirable.
Mr. Weir, in response to your request, we're dealing with Mr. McCauley's motion, which I believe has a deadline of August the 5th. That is the motion we are debating and will ultimately vote upon. So it is out of order to actually ask the minister to appear this afternoon. We'll deal with the motion as it was read.
Just a procedural matter. The motion that I presented for July the 25th, does it come before Mr. McCauley's motion? I just want the clerks to clarify it.
Yeah, I'll speak to that and ask the clerk to verify. My understanding procedurally is that the motions at this meeting will be when you were recognized by the chair. Mr. McCauley had his hand up first. I recognized him. If there are no more comments, we will then vote on his motion. You are the next individual, Madame Ratanzi, that I'd recognize. If you have a motion at that time, you can present it, and we will then proceed from there. Are there further comments or questions on Mr. McCauley's motion? Seeing none, then I will call a question. All in favor of Mr. McCauley's motion, please indicate so by a raise of hands. All opposed. The motion is defeated. Madame Ratanzi, you now have the floor.
In my letter to you, signed by 4 of the committee members, we asked that the committee hold a briefing with the Deputy Minister of Public Service and Procurement Canada on the issues surrounding the Phoenix payroll system. So the motion is that the committee hold a briefing with the Deputy Minister of Public Service and Procurement Canada on the issues surrounding the Phoenix payroll system.
That is the motion. You certainly can speak to us if you want to elaborate.
Well, I think we have a system that has its challenges, and we have the Deputy Minister has been giving a weekly brief on what is happening with the system. And since the Deputy Minister and her assistants are very engaged with the system, they would be the right people that will be able to give us an update on the resolution to the problems and whether things are moving the way they are, what resources they need, etc. So they will be the right people to have as our witnesses.
Comments, Mr. Weir.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think all members of this committee would certainly be keen to have an opportunity to ask questions and have a discussion with the Deputy Minister. But I also think the reason we've convened this meeting is to hear from a broader range of voices. As the Chair mentioned at the outset, in addition to the Deputy Minister, there are other officials present. There are the presidents of the two largest federal public service unions in the room prepared to testify. So I would think that all members of the committee would want to hear from these witnesses, and I would propose what I hope is a friendly amendment to include all of those witnesses named by the Chair in this motion.
We are now debating the amendment. Madame Ratanzi.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy with the amendment, and I'd be happy to entertain the amendment, and if we could combine the two, I'm fine.
All right. Mr. McCauley?
Ms. Ratanzi took the words out of my mouth.
Thank you. Now, procedurally, now, unless there's further comments, we will vote on the amendment. The amendment is to, Mr. Weir, if I'll try and summarize. If I'm off base here, please correct me. Is to include, in addition to the Deputy Minister of Public Services and Procurement, all of the public officials that I had identified in my opening remarks, including the leaders of the two public service unions and as well as two associate deputy ministers.
I have so you've given an amendment, I am fine with it, but in terms of managing the way we are going to call the witnesses forward, I'd appreciate if we go with the Deputy Minister first, and then we can go with the public service unions and other members that are there. That would be fine by us.
Mr. Weir?
So just to clarify, is the proposal to have an hour with the Deputy Minister and her officials and then an hour with representatives of the two federal public service unions?
I think that would be ideal.
If I can interject, if you don't mind, again, since we have no predetermined adjournment, it would be an hour, it could be less, it could be more. It depends on how many questions are from this committee. So when witnesses approach the table, and I'll have to deal with that in a moment, how we get them here, you can ask questions until the sun goes down. So they're not here restricted to 1 hour, they're not here for a full hour. It all depends on the committee members and their questions. So are we in agreement then that if the amendment passes, we will request the Deputy Minister plus the Associate and Assistant Deputy Minister to approach the table, but we will need agreement from this entire committee for that if the motion passes, followed by the two leaders of the public service unions. Are we all clear on that? Then on the amendment, all in favor? All opposed? The amendment carries. The main motion, all in favor? Okay, good. Now, we will deal with this immediately, but we will need agreement. Even though the motion has passed, we have not actually made a formal request for those officials to come forward. Madam Ratanzi, committee members, would you all agree if I called the senior officials from public service forward? If we may then ask Madame Lemay, Madame De Paola, and Mr. Liddy to approach the table. She's supposed to be giving you, right?
I have 3 feet. 1, 2.
Thank you all for being here. Madame Lemay, I understand you have some opening remarks. And please proceed. If you wouldn't mind, just even though I've called you all forward, introducing your colleagues for the benefit of the committee.
I will do that. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, bonjour. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee to discuss the Government of Canada's new pay system, Phoenix, and our plan to address some of the issues that we're facing. I can certainly appreciate your interest in understanding the challenges that we're facing. Accompanying me today are Associate Deputy Minister Gavin Liddy, to my left, and Rosanna Di Paola, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister for Accounting, Banking, and Compensation. So I'll begin with a little background to the Phoenix system, and will then provide you an overview of the challenges we faced and where we are today before discussing our plan to resolve these issues, if that's okay with you. So before going further, I want to emphasize that it is unacceptable for any Government of Canada employee to go unpaid or to be incorrectly paid for the work performed. Employees are coming to work every day, they're putting in the hours required of them, and sometimes more, delivering the services that Canadians require, and they're keeping our country safe and secure. In exchange, they're owed timely compensation to pay their mortgages, to feed their family, and we definitely understand that. J'aimerais maintenant faire une brève mise en contexte de l'important.
I would now like to give you some context concerning the needs that existed that led to the government adopting a new pay system, and I'll speak to the challenges associated with that. Public Services and Procurement Canada is responsible for administering the pay for like MPs, senators, and their staff. The pay administration of the Government of Canada is complex, given that there are 27 collective agreements and hundreds of rules that need to be programmed into the systems. It has become very clear in recent years that the Government of Canada's pay services were inefficient and that the systems represented major risks for failing. The regional pay system, as we knew it, was over 40 years old. Over 1,000 short-term solutions and changes have been made over the years. It was harder and harder to maintain, and it was based on out-of-date technology that put the sustainability of our pay system at risk. At the same time, the number of specialists who understood this obsolete technology had been going down for years, and we were at risk of seeing problems that could have ended all pay for weeks or months. In 2003, a major problem affected the pay of over 4,000 public servants.
Plans for transforming the administration of pay services through two related projects. The first project was to replace the outdated pay system through the purchase of a new, off-the-shelf commercial system that would be integrated with government human resources application. As part of the procurement process, the government acquired the PeopleSoft-based system, a reputable and well-known payroll software, and working with the vendor IBM, the department configured it and called it Phoenix. The other project was to consolidate frontline pay services administration from across government to a new public service pay center in Miramichi, New Brunswick. The Miramichi Pay Center was staffed with 550 employees who were hired in 3 waves, the last of which was completed in December 2014. An OGGO committee report in 2008 recommended support for pay modernization and for potentially redistributing activities to the regions. The goal was and remains to attain a modern, responsive, and flexible pay system that is also cost-effective and sustainable. Le déploiement de Phoenix a nécessité au préalable.
Putting Phoenix in place required 6 years of planning and work by the department, other departments, and IBM, the company responsible for configuring and putting Phoenix in place. Over 16,000 different pay scenarios were tested to ensure that the software would work. At IBM's recommendation, the original deployment calendar was delayed to allow for further tests and for due diligence to be undertaken. We delayed the deployment to February of 2016. In December, the positive results of tests undertaken and a third-party review confirmed the decision to go forward with system implementation. In addition to that, in January, consultations with deputy ministers of all departments supported the deployment of the system. As such, on February 24th, Phoenix was put in place for 120,000 employees in a number of departments. On March 9th, Phoenix sent out its first paychecks, and on April 21st, another 76 departments joined the Phoenix deployment, affecting hundreds of thousands of public services.
The Pay Center had a backlog of 20,000 1,000 employee cases that should have been cleared prior to implementation, but wasn't completed on time. This was exacerbated by backlogs in departments. For example, after going live with Phoenix, we received 20,000 employee extra duty pay requests. 20,000 employee extra duty pay requests. As well, there was a steep learning curve associated with the new system within departments and the pay center. Therefore, despite the significant planning and preparation, we have faced critical problems affecting a considerable number of employees who have experienced a pay issue of one kind or another. I'll give you a sense of the different categories that we're addressing in priority sequence, the numbers associated with each, and our plan to address the situation. Notre première priorité vise.
Our first priority is for employees who are not receiving pay at all. As I've already mentioned, this situation is absolutely unacceptable. Those affected include new hires, students, and those returning from leave without pay, and whose pay has not been reestablished. I indicated at our technical briefing last week that 720 employees had indicated that they had not received any pay. We committed to ensure that 486 of those would be paid on the next payday, July 27th. I can tell you that those employees all received pay yesterday. The 234 other employees, well, we expect that 139 of those will be paid on August 10th, because we now have the necessary information to do that. We are still waiting for information on 35 employees, and after having done considerable verification, we've discovered that 60 people do not have information in any of our systems. Since last week, 589 additional employees have also indicated that they have a problem linked to a lack of pay. And so we are dealing with 210 of those cases with the goal of paying them on August 6th, and we are working with the departments to resolve the cases where we need further information concerning those employees.
Pay may be affected by going on leave or exiting the public service. And last week I reported that about 1,100 employees had brought these issues to our attention. Since July 18th, we've addressed 74 cases and we're processing the remainder as quickly as possible. Employees reporting these types of issues can expect to have their case addressed within 6 weeks. And the third priority are those who are receiving regular pay but missing supplementary pay, such as acting or extra duty pay and salary increment adjustment. This group consists of about 80,000 employees. Without diminishing the importance, these are employees that are receiving their regular paycheck, although they're missing amounts. So since July 18, approximately 1,100 employee cases out of the 80,000 backlog have been resolved, and those employees would see the adjustments on their August 10th pay if they haven't already seen them. Nous n'avons pas terminé, mais nous réalisons des progrès.
We have not finished our work, but we are making progress. We are ensuring that all cases are dealt with. First of all, we have increased staff and we have created temporary pay units across the country. We have increased the number of staff at the Miramichi Pay Center by adding 40 employees at the beginning of the year, and we are now taking measures to manage the workload of employees at the Miramichi Center who have been overworked in recent months. Minister Foote and I had the opportunity to meet with staff at the Miramichi Pay Center yesterday, and we thanked them for their work, and we reiterated that they are not at fault for this situation. We established a temporary pay unit in Gatineau, where we now have 57 employees in place. We expect the number of employees to reach 115 in the coming weeks. I would add that we are very thankful for the partnership of the unions. They are helping us find ways to bring back former pay specialists to join our temporary pay units. We are also creating temporary regional centers, one in Winnipeg, one in Montreal, and one in Shawinigan. The Winnipeg office will have 20 pay advisors and will begin working in the middle of August. The number of advisors will grow to 50, and in the coming weeks, the centers in Montreal and Shawinigan will be operational and will include 20 compensation advisors each. We have also put together a call center, a national call center in Toronto. It's not a pay center, but a call center. Yesterday, 2,500 calls were received. None of them were dropped, and the average wait time was less than 4 minutes. Calls concerning a lack of pay were sent directly to the pay center through an electronic formula, which is filled out by the agent at the call center.
Flexibility in the system to address the very real financial needs of every affected employee. We've encouraged managers to take advantage of the existing processes through which they can issue emergency payments to employees. The Treasury Board Secretariat is exploring options to reimburse employees for their out-of-pocket expenses that they have incurred as a result of inaccurate or missing pay. We have encouraged employees to report their pay problem as quickly as possible through our website and to speak to their manager if they have a pay problem, to discuss next step and the resources available to them. Troisièmement, d'autres sources sont actuellement.
Third, other resources have been deployed to ensure that Phoenix users understand the role that they must play to ensure that pay requests are dealt with accurately and quickly. This is an issue is at the heart of the problems that we are facing today. While we offered training to employees and met with representatives of all departments every week before the rollout, it's clear that we underestimated the amount of time needed for users to be trained and to feel comfortable with the new system, which has added additional stress to the employees at the pay center. Improved tools and other training sessions are being created and will be offered to employees and managers of our department and other departments. The first toolkit will include tools, tutorials, and webinars and will be accessible to the entire public service in the weeks to come. In addition, our department and the Canada School of Public Service are working closely together to create other mandatory training sessions which will help employees and managers use the system, and we will create a toolkit for managers which will include reference documents, checklists, advice on how to help employees dealing with pay and remuneration and other issues.
Speeding up transactions. For example, the pay system now automatically adjusts level for acting to ensure compensation is paid at a correct rate. Fourth, and most importantly, we're working on the system itself. We continue to make adjustments and move forward with planned software enhancement that are increasing automation and shortening timelines. We have started sending managers emails notifying them that they need to approve transactions in the system. We expect that this will have a substantial impact. While I can tell you that these actions are proving effective, they do not, for 1 minute, negate the fact that every employee deserves to be paid for the hours they put in. Anything else is unacceptable. Last week, I reported that 2 privacy breaches related to the Phoenix Pay system have been fixed. On July 26, I was made aware of further privacy breach allowing 4 employees to access names and identification numbers of employees from other departments. We have informed the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. Our Special Investigation Unit has assessed and reported that these breaches are deemed very low risk. I have instructed my department to conduct additional testing to identify additional potential vulnerabilities. The road to pay transformation has not been smooth, but we are committed to learning from this process. We are committed to independent assessment, which would provide valuable insight into the planning and implementation of major projects and would benefit our department and other government organizations. Minister Foote has asked the Auditor General of Canada to review the implementation of the Phoenix system. If there is an audit, we will, of course, fully support the Auditor General and his staff in their work. Pour terminer, je souhaite reconnaître le travail.
To conclude, I would like to thank the Phoenix team for the very hard work that they're doing, as well as the staff at the Pay Center. I would also like to thank the other departments for their support, and I will be very happy to help the committee in its work, and I would like to say that we are fixing the problems. I would also like to tell committee members that our absolute priority is to ensure that employees are paid.
So, did employees get paid today? And the answer to that question is that over 294,000 got paid their regular pay yesterday, and in addition, close to 35,000 of other types of payments, such as extra duty pay, were received. Thank you. Look forward to your questions. My colleagues and I are here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Madame Lemay. For the benefit of the committee, even though this is a special meeting, I am going to recommend to the committee we follow the normal rotation the normal speaking slots that we have in our regular committee meetings. And just for a refresher, that means the first round will be 7 minutes for questions and answers. That will have 2 Liberal speakers, 1 Conservative, 1 New Democrat. The second round will be 4-minute interventions for questions and answers, 2 Conservative. I'm sorry, 5. The second will be 5 minutes. I'm sorry. There'll be 4 speakers for 5 minutes, 2 Conservatives and 2 Liberals. Thank you for that, Ramiz. And the third round will be 1 3-minute intervention by Mr. Weir. We will go back then to the start with 7, 5, and 3, continue questioning until all questions have been posed and answered. With that, we will start our 7-minute round. Madame Ratanzi.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Madame Lemay, and your colleagues for being here. We're all here today because, you know, like you mentioned, it is unacceptable that a single person who has worked and put in the hours should not get paid. And we have seen or heard from lots of our constituents, my colleagues and I, have heard on a constant basis that these people have not received their pay, there is dire hardship, and therefore we would like to resolve the problems. We don't want to put blinkers on. We're not in the habit of putting blinkers on. So we would like to resolve the issue. And you have just made a presentation that you ran parallel 16,000 test cases before you put the system live, correct? Yeah? Was there a parallel system running? And if there was, were there kinks in the system that were brought to your knowledge?
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that I understood the question. I'm trying to get this.
Okay.
So you're wondering if we saw some of the challenges before launching the system?
Did you run a parallel system while you were doing?
We did.
Yes,
we did.
Okay. And when you were testing the system, were there issues that you encountered that brought some concerns to you?
There were, and that's why the actual launch was delayed. And there was a third-party evaluation, and there were some, so that the whole launch was delayed until everybody felt that, first of all, the vendor, the departments, we had a third-party evaluation. There was a state of readiness that was established to be a good state and to move forward with the launch.
So then, was the problem with Phoenix a technical problem, a human resource problem? What was it? Was it a combination of both? Because these problems, whether it's 750 people that are not getting paid or 1 person not getting paid, is really unacceptable. And people have faced a lot of hardships, as you know. So what was the reason that there were issues? Was there technical problems with the system?
So thank you for your question. Because to me, the system, when we talk about the system, it is from the moment somebody works until they get their paycheck in their bank account. And there are many parts to this system. There's obviously the user that has to put information in and managers that have to approve. There's a software that is in between, and there's the pay center where compensation advisors have to do work. So there's different elements to that system. We knew and I think it was a recognized fact that when you launch a system, a transformation of the magnitude of this one, remember that we're talking about over close to 300,000 employees, over 100 departments. Remember the rules that we talked about, 80,000. Like this is a massive undertaking. There was recognitions that there are things that until you actually turn the system on, there's some things that you would not know, and that there would be a learning curve for people to get used to the system. My assessment of this is that when you look back, the part that two things that we did not see coming, I'd say. The first thing is we did not expect to have a backlog when we transferred. So at the end, before the transfer of Phoenix, a number of transactions were there at the very end as we were about to change to Phoenix. And there was about 20,000 transactions that were arrived at the tail end of it that we didn't have time to process. So we started with this backlog. And on top of that, about 20,000 extra duty pay transactions were transferred to us once the system was launched that were actually pre-Phoenix. So you start with a backlog of 40,000 transactions right there. So that part we had not evaluated properly. The other thing that we underestimated, I believe, is the time and the effort that we would have to do to make sure that the users understood the new system, because it's a different system in terms of use. The user today goes into the system, and I'll give you a short example. Overtime, it used to be that you'd fill out your form in overtime, and then it would take like 8 to 12 weeks to get paid because it was paper, you'd go through the system. Today, if you work overtime, you enter it, your manager approves it, and it's paid on the next paycheck. So, but it's a different, if you enter your overtime, maybe overtime is not a good example. I'll give you acting. Acting, same thing. But if you enter the acting as the person is acting in a position, it will be done automatically. But if you decide to wait and 3 months later, or let's say a month later, you say, oh, I have to make sure that this person gets the acting, and the process is then processed, then it becomes a manual transaction. It's not automated because it's outside of the current system. So it's a system that is made to be used I'll say live, and so there's a lot of things that I think we underestimated that we needed to make sure that employees understood how to use the system, what to do, and that's what we're working on very hardly.
So going forward, you have indicated the solutions that you have shown us, or the actions that you have taken. Are you satisfied with the fact that this system will go forward without a glitch, or people will get paid and we won't hear any more complaints about it? Because you say there are 234 people who have still not got paid. They'll get paid August 10th. Is it acceptable?
So I would say to that to expect that we expect that there is a transition period. There is a transition period where we will face issues that we have to correct, whether it's how we program the system, make adjustments to some of the rules, whether it's making sure people understand how it's used, making sure that that managers understand that they need to do some of the paperwork, whether it's onboarding or others, right away. So these things will keep happening for a bit as we are transitioning, and there's a learning curve. So to say to you that we're done and we're not going to have any more issues, we fully expect that we will keep seeing some issues. The key thing is that we now understand where the backlog and the composition of how we got here. But more importantly, we have a process for people that do not get paid. So if somebody doesn't get paid, we absolutely need to know about it, because if we don't know, we can't address it. So if we know, we're able to go to the root cause and find out why they're not getting paid. So far, we've been able to address many of them. If we find another reason, we will address it. So it's really important for employees to tell us when they have pay issues so that we can adjust the system. The good news is that because we have the temporary centers, and we have, as I've told you, several of those now, it allows us to deal with the backlog that was created, and allows us to monitor how we're doing at Miramichi with the Pay Center, because there's still a learning curve there, right? I mean, it's a new system there too. They're doing much better in terms of the system, and yesterday employees were saying that huge difference from day one to now in terms of using the system. So that we'll monitor that very closely, and we'll make sure that we will keep the temporary units until we've reached a steady state. So we have that for the transition period. Once we've reached a steady state and Miramichi is processing and everybody in the system is now functioning at how it should, then we'll be in a position to remove.
Thank you.
Just for the benefit of the committee members, just because of the subject material here, I'm going to give a little latitude on the length of questions and answers. That was a fair bit over 7 minutes, but again, I think it's important that everyone gets a full understanding of what's going on within Phoenix. We'll turn now to Mr. McCauley for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. Ms. Lemay, it's known that executives public service eligible to receive performance bonuses. Have any current or former executives from the Department of Public Works receive bonuses in 2015?
In 2015? I would have to look. I'm sorry, I don't have, I wasn't there in 2015. 2016, I can tell you no.
Well, the year's not over yet, so.
Oh, sorry. So you mean for the year 2015? Absolutely. So I can answer your question. I apologize. No, nobody has, and it's not a priority. We're really focused on getting people paid. That's what we're focused on. I mean, and that will be the last priority for us.
Okay. So no one received bonuses, the ADM, DM, et cetera? Perfect. The media obviously has been reporting very widely. We see them here today on the personal stories, civil servants not being paid. You know, pregnant mother had to quit her job because her daughter, she couldn't pay for her daughter for daycare, et cetera. I mean, hundreds and thousands of stories. This mismanagement by big government, it's, you know, real life, day-to-day consequences. A very simple question, it's going to be a real blunt question. Who's taking responsibility for this personally? And in the real world, who's going to get fired for this?
So the answer to your question, I'd say, is right now we are taking it collectively because we're absolutely focused on fixing. We are spending long days, a number of us, of just making sure that we get people paid. After that, we're committed to doing an evaluations. We're committed to looking at lessons learned. There's going to be the Auditor General. There's going to be a number of processes, and we will be able to answer your question at that point, I think, more substantially. But at this point, really, our efforts are solely focused on getting people paid.
We'll ask in another committee meeting then.
I'm sure we'll see.
It's understandable. We understand, we've heard before, you know, it's ultimately Minister Foote is her final decision to implement the Phoenix pay system. Ministers do receive technical advice from civil servants, obviously. What was your advice to the minister on going live with Phoenix?
So, personally, I was not in the position personally, but I can tell you that Minister Foote did receive the advice to roll out Phoenix for the February launch.
Okay.
So that was.
And the next launch after that, the two?
Yes, I was there, and the advice was to do the second phase.
From yourself?
I'm trying to remember if it was prior that I arrived, because when I arrived, actually, the data had already been converted, even if, because the 21st.
There was two portions. There was the February and the April, and we heard in committee with the President of the Treasury Board, unless we're 99% sure it's working, we're not going to go ahead. Which of the civil servants, I assume yourself, advised Minister Foote, we're ready, let's go?
So I understand your question. I just want to clarify one thing. The date of the 21st is the date where the system's on, but the data conversion starts way before that. So the data conversion actually started beginning of April. But with the information that we had in April, I would have recommended her to go to the second phase. I actually had conversations with the unions about this. We were at a stage where we had implemented the first wave. What we were seeing in terms of complaints, and we were monitoring this, what we were getting in terms of complaint was actually very low. And I remember even in May when we were at this committee, I believe Minister Foote talked about the number of complaints we were getting, and I think at the time we had only 77 that were unresolved. So this is what we were seeing at the time. And we, as I said earlier, we expected that we would see some and we'd be able to address. So my recommendation, if I had to make an official recommendation to her, I would have said yes the same way. But I did talk to the unions about us moving to that direction. So yes, I was fully supportive of it.
Okay. Did you flag to the minister possibilities like this occurring? Like, here's a risk, we go forward, or was it unequivocal, let's go?
Maybe I should turn to my colleague who was there during the whole step of the transition, because unfortunately that portion of it, as I said, I just came in on the tail end of it.
Yeah,
so,
I realize that, but I would expect someone in your position would have done
absolutely.
Look back and ask people before.
Okay, so the reality is that we all expected that there would be some, some transition, some period, from every, whether it's me, it's the private sector, I mean, I think everybody expected that this would not happen without one single, there was a transition planned. So yes, but the recommendation to the minister was clearly go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the advice she got from officials, clearly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You had mentioned about you had discussions with the union, but we've heard from them that they were advising as early as January not to proceed. Mm-hmm. But you're saying their advice to you was to proceed.
No, What I'm saying is that,
Did I mishear?
sorry, I may have misspoken.
perhaps.
Correct. So I joined on April 11th, and I believe I met with our representative, Mrs. Lackey, probably on the Wednesday of my first week, and we had conversations about Miramichi at the time and the folks there. The meeting that I had with the heads of the union was on April 25th, and at that time they had, prior to that, already started raising the request to not go to phase 2. At that time, phase 2, once you've launched the first wave, I think it would have been really difficult not to go to the second wave. You're managing 2 systems. People are working with 2 different systems, trying to understand and learn one while they're dealing with the other one. There's crossover from departments that are in an old system, a new system. It was really felt, and I think if you validate with industry a move like that, you're better to move
Couple
all
quick
pieces.
questions, because I'm running out of time.
Sorry.
I think I know the answer. Would you have, I guess looking back, would you have advised, let's run with the 2 systems for a bit longer? And did you or anyone else in your department, the ADMs, suggest, maybe we should run a bit longer to smooth out everything before we proceed fully?
I think I would have made another type of recommendation. I think I would have looked at making sure that employees really understood and all the departments understood the magnitude of the change in terms of the change management associated with that. And I would have made sure that we did have additional compensation advisors just in case we were going through transition. But I would have said that it was necessary to move to the second phase.
Thank you. Mr. Weir, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think what we've heard so far really underscores the need for this committee to hear directly from the minister. And, I would note again that she is in Ottawa today, so it's quite unfortunate that she has not made herself available for this meeting. But I would just like to kind of start where your statement concluded by mentioning that a large number of federal employees have been paid correctly. Now, to me, that's a little bit like saying that 2 out of 3 isn't bad, but I really don't think that that's very much consolation to the third of federal employees who have not been paid correctly. Now, Deputy Minister LeMay, you've suggested that based on what was known at the time, that the decision to implement Phoenix was defensible. I would ask, knowing what you know now, do you still think that it was the right decision?
I will answer the same thing that I just answered. I think we could have done things, additional measures, but the move to the second wave and the move to Phoenix is the right decision. But I would have done it a little differently, and I would have done additional measures knowing what I know today.
Okay, so I think you've said that the implementation of phase 2 was somehow inevitable or sensible based on phase 1 already being in place. Do you regret, though, the implementation of phase 1? Do you think Phoenix was the right way to go from the beginning?
Phase 1 had a lot of planning and a lot of testing. As I said in my presentation, and maybe we can expand on this if you wish, there was a number of steps before launching. So there was testing. The launch was actually delayed. It was originally planned in 3, got moved to 2. It was delayed. There was a third-party assessment. So the information, and again, I remember. Even checking in with all the Secretary of the Treasury Board, checking in with all departments as to the readiness of everyone to the change to Phoenix. So, at the time, I don't think that there was. It was definitely we were ready as we could have been in terms of the system and the data. Now, again, I think that the change management portion is something we underestimated. And maybe a few people additional to help us through the transition would have been better.
Okay, now you've also said that you can't address what you don't know, and you referenced the fact that when the minister was in this very chair on May 17th, and I asked her about Phoenix, she indicated that there were only 77 unresolved cases. So we now know there are 80,000 federal employees who have not been paid correctly. So I'm wondering, how did the number go from less than 80 to 80,000. How was your department and the minister not aware of the gravity of this problem sooner?
So a couple of things, and maybe I should just clarify. The 80,000, and maybe make sure that everybody understands, these are not people going without pay. These are different things, either acting, promotion, transfers, extra duty pays, and things like that. So the in terms of the number that the minister gave is the number that we were tracking. This is the number we were tracking at Miramichi when we were getting complaints. This was our intake and our tracking of complaints in cases resolved and left to resolve. So that's the numbers that we had. We had, following my meeting with the unions on April 25th, I believe, one of the decision was that we would have regular meetings to make sure that we heard all of the issues, because the biggest challenge in the implementation at the first was that we were hearing things, but we didn't have the data. So we were asking to have all the information from every channel that we could, so that we could address some of the issues. And the unions worked really closely with us to try and get us everything that they would hear from their members. And then they sent directly through Minister Fitt's office another series. And then we realized with the phone lines, we were at capacity with the phone lines, and that's when we decided to put our web form up so that we could ask people to go to the website, fill in the forms to make sure we had all the information. And that actually attracted and got us the real information and data, because we have had a number of employees tell us about their issues through that web form. So the numbers actually grew substantially from that point.
Another question about the transmission of information within your department. It's been reported that it was known back in January that Phoenix had breached the personal information of federal employees. Yet the minister indicates that she was not aware of this privacy breach until last week. I'm wondering how that happened.
So I think we have to remember there are processes that we follow in events of privacy breach. And I don't want to diminish in any way the importance of this. But the fact that the breaches are about information, employee names and employee numbers, there's not a lot that you can do with that within, like you can't go into the systems, you need other things like codes and other sorts of codes. So the evaluation that was done, and is still the one that remains today from our investigation section, is that this risk is actually very low. And in the case of risks that are very low, it's a process by which there's no need to advise the employees because there's no risk really to their personal information. And the process was not to immediately inform the minister. So we have actually changed that after this, because Phoenix being Phoenix, even if it's very low, the minister felt it was extremely important. So we are all on the same page. And so any Phoenix little small issue, we have now developed a process to make sure that we're all aware immediately.
Okay. You mentioned that the federal payrolls are very complex, and also that the concept of Phoenix was to run them using off-the-shelf software from IBM. Do you believe that that was realistic, to think that off-the-shelf software could handle the federal payrolls?
It's an off-the-shelf software, but as we said, we did modify it to fit our needs, right? And there are 80,000 rules that we had to put in. So it is a customized off-the-shelf, let's put it that way. But it is a proven system. It's a system that has worked well, and so that was the decision, and to my knowledge, a good one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for coming here today. And in my riding of St. John's East, there do happen to be, even though it's all the way out on the as far east as you can get from here, there's a number of people, especially who work irregular hours, who have been difficulty getting their pay, their rightful pay, especially for ship captains and whatnot. And so it's from your earlier testimony, my understanding is that it used to take 8 to 12 weeks for a regular pay to be paid, and yet phase one, the time between phase one and phase two was only about 8 weeks. So I wouldn't even expect people to complain seriously during that type of a window. They wouldn't even necessarily have noticed that there were glitches with the system in the timeline before the Phase 2 decision was made. What do you think about that?
Well, we actually have a number of cases in the backlog that predate quite a bit. So you're right that when you look at the past, there was a time between work done and work paid. The expectation with this system is that will be much better. The transition has made it such that we are seeing cases that are unacceptable and we have to fix. But the hope is really that once we're to our steady state, we will be much further ahead than before. So at this point, we're hearing a lot of things, which is good. Like I mean, I think it's really important to know that we need this information, and some of it will be on things that we would have never heard before. But the fact that we had this issue and that it's been so prominent, and it's good because we're going to get everything out, all of the issues that employees are having, and we'll be able to address them.
Okay, so it sounds to me as if, you know, there will be certain amount of continuous change management to be done. You talked about some enhancements, changes to manager processes that will be happening going forward. Are there extra expenditures going into, non-budget expenditures going into this additional design work that's being done to customize Phoenix?
It's a good question. The system was, the plan was that there would be $70 million in saving every year in the implementation of Phoenix. I think it's fair to say that this year we won't achieve that. We estimate the cost of all of the one-offs, like the temporary units, the call center, and all those initiatives to be between 15 to 20 million. And we are still evaluating the cost because we will be working on other ways, as you mentioned, to accelerate and enhance. So we're evaluating the cost of that. So I don't have a number for you today, but remember that there was a planned 70 million a year in savings. So,
with respect to the backlog, and maybe we won't worry too much about the timeline, about how the backlog developed, but in terms of remedying the backlog, I'm looking at some of the numbers from your presentation earlier, and then from your presentation earlier today, your weekly update. It seems that with about 56 employees working on resolving backlog issues, they got through 1,100 in 1 week. You extrapolate that out for the number of new independent centers, and you're saying we should be through this at the end of October. Will you be able to continually update us week by week as to whether or not this is still an achievable target?
Absolutely, and I'd like to put it on, like it's on the website. Thank you for the question, because I wanted to mention in my presentation that we actually have put a workflow of timeline, and maybe I can pass this around. Sorry, it's just off the press this morning, and we're putting it on our website. But it gives to employees the possibility to look at the type of issues and when we expect to have them resolved. And yes, we will update this on a regular basis.
Oh, that's good, because managing expectations of employees is really a huge part of the battle here, because people are quite upset right across the country. With respect to the issue you noted around automated retroactive pay adjustments not being provisioned in the system, will the enhancements that are being made to the system allow managers to do retroactive automated pay adjustments so that those will also be processed more efficiently?
Yes, maybe I can let Rosanna give you a little bit of details. I believe it's going to be in July.
Yeah, so we have a few retroactive automation going in. We have one going in at the end of actually mid-month of August to allow the retroactivity calculations to be done automatically, because right now they all have to be done manually. So there's got to be a compensation advisor who has to manually go in and intervene versus putting in the dates in the past and allow Phoenix to automatically calculate. So those things are going in. And one other big mass retroactivity is what we call it. So as collective agreements get signed, we have to then pay back for the PSAC, for example. I think the next collective agreement, whenever it gets signed, we have to go back a year or two, and this will allow Phoenix to automatically calculate those.
Are you saying that this this functionality, which would be required or expected to be needed in the case of any type of union negotiation. It did not exist in February, or did it exist and people weren't properly trained on it, or what was the status of the ability of the system to handle retroactive pay adjustments at the time of launch?
It could handle it, only it needs a manual intervention versus an automated process. So what we're doing in mid-August and then mid-September is allowing the system to automate that calculation.
One final question. Our committee is seeing a fair amount of issues arising out of the change management process on the IT side in government. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm hearing certain people, witnesses say that it's of market to do it all one fell swoop, just implement the system. But my experience in the private sector has been that you would pilot certain new initiatives, you'd do it with a small percentage of the number of people involved, you'd check to see how that affected the training times, you would measure the types of timelines required to resolve problems, maybe 5%, and then you would be able to multiply that by 20 and figure out how many additional resources you would need to roll out the full process. So I'm wondering, why were pilots not used?
Our initial intent was to pilot, and then when we were around this time, a little bit earlier than this time, around May of last year, we decided we weren't quite ready to go ahead with the pilot. But what we did was we reconfigured the way we were going to go live. So rather than go live with a mishmash of departments, is we took a grouping of departments, 34 departments, and they had two things in common. One, their pay was being administered at the pay center. So the concentration of compensation advisors, the people who really know how to administer pay, were in one location. Targeted, we can go there, SWAT team it, and everybody's there to know to gather around the people who are going to use it. So that was one commonality. The second commonality these 34 departments had is they were all on the same platform, PeopleSoft HR platform. Phoenix is based on a North America payroll with PeopleSoft, so the two integrate perfectly. You enter information into HR, it flows into payroll. That integration was key. It eliminated the need to do duplicate key entry, which was the case before we went live with Phoenix. So before we went live with Phoenix, every time anybody did an acting, the deputy mentioned acting as an example, somebody had to put the information in HR, they'd have to rekey it into payroll. The error rate was high, so that was all fixed. So the first grouping of go live in February was very concentrated. Same type of departments, good. It was just the right approach in our view.
Committee, I know that Mr. Whalen, you wanted an additional question. I remind committee members we will be here as long as it takes. If you have questions, we will remain here until your questions have been asked and answers have been proffered. Mr. Richards, welcome to our committee. 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So in response to some of the other questions you received today, you were fairly clear that the advice that had been given to the minister by officials had been to proceed. And it sounds like that was unreserved advice. But I'm curious. I'm sort of struggling to understand it. I know that the PSAC had expressed some reservations. I've got a memo that they have had up on their website, I believe it is, but I have a copy of it here on my BlackBerry, and I'll just read briefly from it, where they indicate that for some time now, and this was from April 5th, for some time now, since the new pay system Phoenix was launched at Public Works Pay Center, we've been hearing from our members of numerous problems and concerns. They go on to indicate that they're taking those concerns seriously, and they're following up with the employer to see if they can slow down the implementation of the new system until errors can be corrected to avoid future problems. PSAC has already communicated with management that they either need to add more staff at the pay center or slow down the pace files are being transferred. So it sounds like there was certainly some concerns raised by PSAC. Were those concerns provided in terms of advice to the minister that we have received this from PSAC, there's some concerns here, maybe this should be slowed down? Was that ever communicated to the minister?
They were certainly received by staff. Again, I'm going to go into, maybe I'll turn to Gavin because you were there the whole time, but we certainly knew about these, and we assessed that just with everything else that we had in terms, again, of complaints when we're looking at April, and our recommendation to the minister was to go ahead.
Sure, but wouldn't that have been something that would have been fairly important to have been communicated to the minister when there's concerns by the Public Service Union that they're recommending this be slowed down? Wouldn't that be something you think the minister should be aware of and should be taken into consideration in the advice given to the minister? So I really would have to ask again, was this not provided to the minister?
Do you have an answer to
I
that?
don't recall, actually. I know we provided a briefing note to...
Could we ask that you get back to this committee to indicate whether the minister was informed of those concerns and was that taken into the advice that the minister received? Because I think that's an important point.
I can tell you that we took it into into consideration, and our advice was clear to move.
But it's certainly something that I think should have been communicated to the minister as well, for her in her decision making as well. And did anyone ever flag to the minister the possibility that people could be in a situation of not getting paid? Was that ever brought to the minister's attention? Was that something that was given to her for consideration, that there was a possibility that people may not get paid?
Well, definitely not in those words when I was there.
No. So what? I would wonder why not. I mean, it sounds like you're indicating earlier that there was a backlog that you indicated was unanticipated, but why would that have been unanticipated? Why would a large backlog like that not have been something that could have been anticipated, and why would that not have been communicated to the minister?
Okay, so the backlog, again, are people that are getting paid, and these are adjustments in incrementals, right? So, and there were, in the past, time and delays between actings and overtime and payments. So that is something that has been in the system previously. So if we're talking about those, when I talk about not being paid, is people that we have in our category 1 that are people that the 720 that came to us and said we're not getting paid. Those are the ones that for us are very important and are a surprise that we have to really understand why and get to the bottom of it, and we have processes to make sure that we address them and that we'll correct so it doesn't happen.
Okay. So the other area that I wanted to kind of ask about a little bit, on May 17th, when the minister appeared before this committee, she indicated that there was only 77 outstanding files to resolve. And then, since we've obviously heard that that's a far larger number, about 80,000 affected cases, and that was only just a few weeks later, I guess. So I would imagine that those 80,000 cases didn't just magically appear within those few weeks. I guess on top of that, we've also, even today, we've heard, I think there's 500 more cases that have showed up. So who told the minister that there was only 77 cases?
Oh, we did.
So that was just completely incorrect information that the minister had received at that time, or was it just incomplete information, or?
It was the information that we had at the time. You want that something?
Yeah, I think those were the complaints we had received.
Okay.
And I think in our case, and the deputy's given some examples, before Phoenix, there was lengthy delays to receiving backlog, acting pay, extra duty pay, transfers, those types of things. And they were measured in weeks and weeks. So when we went live with Phoenix, the goal was to clear those up, every single case, within 20 working days, so 4 weeks. So the 81,000 public servants are those who've exceeded the 4 weeks. So there weren't complaints on those. Those were files that we were not able to close out within the 4-week service standard. And that's why there's a difference in a number. And as the deputy also said, we were hearing a lot from the union, members of parliament, through the minister's office and other deputies that there were problems. That's why we went with the live web form, because they weren't getting to us. We were getting some complaints, but again, our phone system wasn't able to handle the volume, and you probably heard in the press about the numerous people who phoned hundreds of times and weren't able to get through. So we wanted to establish a different methodology. So even today, we're at about 10,000 complaints. So there's lots of public servants who haven't complained, and that was the difference between the two numbers. Those were the complaints that we'd heard, and those were the numbers that were unresolved at the time we provided the number to the minister. So it's a different number.
Thank you, Mr. Liddy. Mr. Greenwald, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Lemay, for coming today. A lot of the questions have focused on what went wrong. I think we can all agree that there's an issue with the rollout, and that's a discussion for another time. I think there's two discussions to be had here. I think the purpose of today's committee meeting, for me particularly, is to ensure that people get paid. Because it's not right that people are working and not getting paid, especially when you hear the heartbreaking stories in the news that just recently happened yesterday, and then especially about students. Not too long ago, I was a summer student, and I can only imagine, the stress of not getting paid throughout the summer. So I'm very pleased to see that priority number one includes students and new hires that may have got their first job at a university, that have to pay student debt, are living off credit cards. It's unacceptable for anybody to be working and not getting paid, and it's very unacceptable, in my humble opinion, for people to be incurring additional expenses because they're not getting paid on time. So whether that's credit card interest, whether that's missing loan payments, mortgage payments, can you please talk about some of the solutions that we've implemented, particularly how many more people have we hired to solve this problem so that we can get people the money that they rightfully deserve?
Thank you. So we have, in Miramichi, we hired 40 additional staff at the beginning of the year. We expect to have over 115 soon in Gatineau, 50 in Winnipeg, 20 in Shawinigan, 20 in Montreal. So that is a significant amount of people that are going to be coming to the table to help us to get through the backlog. We're also doing the education component, which is going to be extremely important to get the change management aspect of the system. And we are also, we've created internally what we call an operations center to make sure that we can get all the information and make sure that we have a process that flows. So when we hear cases of people not getting paid, I feel I don't want that. So the important thing for people that are not getting paid is for us to get in touch, for them to get in touch with us, because we have processes to get them paychecks in a fairly short time. And if they need an emergency salary payment, they can get it in days. So nobody should go without money if they need it and they've worked for it. So that's really important. And in terms of students, maybe if I can just do a little pause. The way the system works, and that's what it worked before Phoenix, is that you have to work your 2 weeks before you're entered in the system and you get paid. So when you join the public service, it will take, if you're onboarded, so all your information is in and everything is settled the day one, it will take, if you're lucky, 3, probably 4 weeks to get paid, no matter what. And this has nothing to do with Phoenix. This was like that before. So the challenge is that for a student that's with us for 10 weeks or 12 weeks, you start with 4 weeks, assuming that the person that hired you and onboarded you had put everything in. So if you wait 1 week or 2 to onboard your student, you're now at 6 weeks. So we'll have to pay very special attention to students because they are so important to us. We are looking and trying to think how we can, for the next wave of students, find a process that would alleviate that, because we have to make sure that they get that earlier.
My second question is very much focused on the compensation mechanisms that will be implemented to help alleviate the pain that's been caused because of Phoenix. For example, if somebody was late on a mortgage payment and the interest charged on that, if somebody was late on a tuition payment, interest charged on credit card bills, in my humble opinion, I would think that everybody should be in a neutral position, or if not better. Because nobody should be in a worse off position on a technicality or, in all honesty, a mistake. And the blame game can go on for years, and there's a time and a place for that. But I really am focused on the workers here to ensuring that they're put in a position that's equal to, if not better, than they would have been had this problem never occurred in the first place. Can you please talk to what the department is looking into to ensuring that people are compensated fairly?
So I can tell you that we're very seized with these issues, and our colleagues at the Treasury Board are working with the unions, and they're developing a process. We don't have the details yet. As soon as we have them, we'll make them available. We're asking employees to keep whatever piece of justification that they can, like keep track of what it's costing them. There will be a process in place, and they will be made aware of how they can put a claim.
I'm very glad to hear that. It probably, even though people are so frustrated with the system, it gives them some reassurance that at the end of the day, they will be able to get to a neutral position, if not better. My last question focuses on the fact that, yes.
If I
Mr.
may
Chair.
interject, and I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair is a fair guy, so I will defer to him.
We will have an opportunity for your third question, but it'll have to come in a subsequent round. Mr. McCauley, for 5 minutes, please.
Right. I just want to go back to the implementation. What would have been the risks of not pulling the trigger and going through with phase 2, despite, to us, the evidence of information at the time that we weren't ready for it? We've heard from the minister and yourself, no, we couldn't have delayed it. What were the risks of delaying it?
Well, we believe that the risk was greater delaying it than not delaying it.
What were the risks? Not what you believe are the risks. What were the risks, please?
Yeah, so the risks were running two systems. And the risk of running two systems in parallel is that, for example, if someone transfers from one government department to another, then you have no ability to transfer their pay file. And the longer we ran two systems, the more of a problem that would have been. Also, we would have had to have had, we didn't have the compensation staff to do it at the time because all of them were fully employed on the new system or getting ready to transfer. So those are the two most significant risks of going. So once we had pulled the trigger in January, unless there was a significant catastrophic problem with the software itself, we were almost, had to go ahead with the second wave.
Okay. We asked earlier, one of my colleagues, if we ever briefed or if you had ever briefed the minister or the cabinet that we should not proceed with this system, and the comment was, you don't recall, and I don't know.
No, I didn't. I said I didn't recall whether or not we had specifically told the minister that the union had objected or had concerns, because we briefed the minister sometimes 2 and 3 times a week on 4 or 5 different files, and we do that week on week on week. So I don't recall every specific piece of advice I've ever given to the minister.
Okay. Did we ever advise her not, hey, this is going to be a big problem, or was it just the information you had, it's going to be a pain, but we can muddle through?
Well, I don't think we used the words that we would muddle through. We felt
what I mean, but
the considered risks were that on balance we should go forward. Yeah. We did outline that this was not going to be, in all cases, a smooth process. And I'll go back to what the deputy said again. Paying people relies on somebody getting a letter of offer, them signing the letter of offer. Then it relies on the HR professional to submit that to the Phoenix system. Then it relies on an individual pay person in the Phoenix system to enter it into the software. So there's lots of different players, and I think the number of 589 people who've indicated that they weren't paid on the last pay, but only 210 are in the system, this goes to the extent of the issue. It's a number of different steps that have to be taken to get somebody paid. And so it's really getting all of those pieces, as the deputy said, from end to end, working efficiently. And that's where our biggest challenges are today, is getting it all working from end to end.
Okay. If I may, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to be absolutely clear on this. We did recommend to the minister to go ahead. I mean, that's a clear, so I just don't want to, I want to make sure it's very clear. It was our recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We've heard today, a lot of stuff coming out in the press, gentlemen not being paid. When he finally gets paid, he gets overpaid. Have there been any inadvertent payments made or caught just before they were issued? Large amounts? Have we heard rumors of huge amounts of possible overpayments?
Yes, there have been, and we have a process to get that back. So yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah. How much is at risk here? I've heard figures thrown around of in the millions.
You evaluated?
Yeah,
You evaluated that?
So I don't recall every one, but we do have stopgap measures in the systems that will not issue payments. Some could be not the $1 million, but some could be legitimate with severance payments going into the tens of thousands of dollars. But we do have stopgap measures both in Phoenix and in the standard payment system that'll stop a large payment from going through.
Yeah,
it gets withdrawn, and we look and see if it was legitimate or not.
What was the highest amount of inadvertent payment?
Sorry, don't recall.
No? Okay. Very good. The Prime Minister said he's taken personal responsibility to ensure the system gets fixed. He's asked the Clerk of the Privy Council or tasked with fixing the issues and obviously working with you. What is the Clerk of the Privy doing, and what role is the Prime Minister playing in that work?
Well, we have been keeping the Privy Council office aware of every step in the last month. We've been working together, and they've been supporting us in many ways. And that's it. You know, what you have to remember, I think, is that this is not a PSPC issue solely. It is an enterprise-wide transformation. It is a Government of Canada issue, and our colleagues, my colleagues, are totally seized with that. I mean, it is their employees, right, that are not that are having issues. So it's not just us, and it's the collective, the collective of the Government of Canada that is concerned and acting at every step of the process.
5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for being here today. I think the first goal, or at least my first goal, for this committee today, in this crisis situation, is to find solutions and to be reassured that the issue, well, first that we have concrete solutions for employees. That's my first concern, as we say, because there will certainly be a post-mortem at some point, and you've already mentioned that we can find who's responsible, and that's certainly not the solution for today. I want to follow the recommendations of our chair, who said that we don't want to get too political with the testimony today. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing from the other side is that there's a lot of politics, and we're not focused on solutions and the positive side of things. So I'd like to ask you to speak to us about the short-term solutions for people who haven't been paid. You've said that people need to advise you that they haven't been paid so that they can find solutions. And here I see this document that you've presented. There are priorities and there are solutions. So why, if we want to get into the details, why are there people who have waited 3 months or even 9 months? Is that true? Are these just rumors, or is that true? But I see there are solutions before us. So I'd like to ask you to get into the details to assure us that there aren't other or won't be other problems in a short term, and talk about the solutions. Reassure me, if you will, please, that we have solutions, and I'll certainly have other questions. Well, the approach that we've taken, I would say, since June, the beginning of June, when we began to see a rising number of problems, has been to say that we need to give employees a process through which they can get directly in touch with us, and then we will send the information to the departments, or we'll find a way to accelerate things in critical cases. And that's why we've created these priorities. And I hope that this will reassure you to know that if someone hasn't been paid, they don't have to wait. Well, ideally, they'll speak to their manager and their department, and if there's a problem, they can also get directly in touch with us, that we'll be able to do what is necessary, because if we have the information, we'll start the process. If not, we'll go get the information from the department. So they have a way to get in touch with us and to rapidly get paid, along with the fact that they have access to pay advances through the departments. That's for priority number two, or priority group number one. For priority group number two, we have a process in place that's a bit longer, but what's good here, and we've confirmed with our colleagues at Service Canada, those who are leaving, for example, on parental leave, won't have to wait to get the document that they leave. I'm not sure what it's called in French, this document. And they can apply directly to get their EI without that document. So while we're dealing with the issues, they can move forward. I would say that the other positive point here is that, well, with the backlog and the numbers we gave you earlier, I think that to people who have problems with transactions that predate Phoenix or that have been in the system for a long time can look at this and know that their transactions will be dealt with within a certain amount of time. If I can interrupt you, is there monitoring that is being done on the cases that have been raised, for example, somebody that wasn't paid for 2 or 3 weeks? Is there follow-up on that case from the first day to ensure that that person will be paid or will receive emergency pay in the meantime? And so is there somebody who's following up on that to ensure that it's not just sent into just a great big pile of all the other problems? Is there a supervisor? Is there somebody who's looking at these individually? Well, thank you for your question, because I was going to forget to mention that one of the things that we've added is that every week and daily, Rosanna speaks with her colleagues in finance, and they transmit all of the requests that we receive. They're sent directly to the departments, so the department knows, if they're not aware, that somebody in their department has asked us for help with a solution. And so those payments can be sent out in just a couple of days. So we're not leaving people behind. So there's no reason why somebody who isn't getting paid wouldn't have access to any money. No, not at all. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Weir.
And after that, we'll go back to questions.
Thank you. I think I would have to respectfully disagree with the notion that implementing Phase 2 of Phoenix was the correct decision, especially given what we know now, that Phoenix has resulted in about a third of federal employees not being paid correctly. Now, Mr. Liddy made the argument that the risks of not implementing Phase 2 outweighed the risks of implementing it. So just to make that a bit concrete, are you saying that if Phase 2 of Phoenix had not been implemented, that more than a third of federal employees would not have been paid correctly?
Possibly, and possibly not paid at all if we were running two systems. So, and again, we're talking about a third of the public servants that aren't being paid correctly. Are absolutely right, but it's a delay in the payment they're expected to receive. So they are receiving their base pay. What they're not receiving is their acting or their transfer from one government department to another. And these were problems we experienced before Phoenix was implemented, as well, with weeks and weeks of delay as well. So the system was designed to fix those weeks of delays, and I'm confident that we'll get there once we've cleared the backlog.
Okay, but surely you're not suggesting that the problems with the federal government's payrolls before Phoenix were worse than what we're seeing now?
The delays in paying people acting, transferring from other government departments, and extra duty pays were certainly in the weeks and weeks of delay.
So like what proportion of federal employees would that have been under the previous system?
I don't have those figures. I have figures for a number of departments, not by number of employee, but by the number of weeks delay. And they're up to 24 weeks depending on the category.
Okay.
And
so
this is 2009 figures when the case was made to go forward with Phoenix.
I mean, I guess to ask a kind of similar question a different way, I mean, how much worse would things need to be for you to concede that it was a mistake to rush ahead with the implementation of Phoenix?
Can I just make sure that I didn't misspeak? I believe I said that in my opinion, I would have done things differently. There's things that we would have done differently. So we're not saying this is a success by a long shot. We realize there's real issues, there's real people involved, and we're really serious about solving it. So please don't go away here thinking that we think this is a great thing and it's all good, Phase 2. That's not the case. But what we're saying is that we could have done things differently, and we're trying to address them now. We will learn a lot from this, a lot. But we will put in place and make sure that people get paid, and we will make the system better, and we will make it what it's supposed to be. The transition is much more difficult and much longer than we thought. So that's what I would like the committee to take away.
We'll go back to the 7-minute rotation now. Mr. Garrettson, I have you on my list as the first speaker on the government side.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us and answer our questions. My office in Kingston and the Islands, my constituency office, has been dealing with this since well before the beginning of April. Because we have a lot of government employees, but perhaps government employees in different departments, we've seen different phases of this. It's taken me a while to wrap my head around this, and I wouldn't even say that I'm fully there yet. But what I can say is that there seem to be very specific issues that are different throughout different departments in the government. In particular, I'll give you one example. In the military, there are military and non-military personnel. In order for the military personnel are fine. The non-military personnel need to use Phoenix to go in if they're working shift work and log their hours. Their superior, who is a military personnel, has to then go into Phoenix and approve that. The problem is the military personnel don't have PRI numbers, so they can't get into Phoenix. That's one problem. Another problem, we've talked a lot about underpayment, people that are owed money. How about people that have been overpaid? And it seems simple enough because you have a device to take that money back, but what about their pension payments that have gone in? Usually pension payments are just one direction. So their pension is based on what they're making, and if we've overpaid them and put more into their pension, how do we take that money back? So I'm not asking you to drill down into the details of answering these questions, but I want assurance from you that you understand and have a knowledge of all of these individual problems so that you can move forward. And then the next question is, what resources do you need, if any, to help improve and make it happen quicker than the timelines you've indicated in your chart here?
So we are aware of definitely of the military issue, and maybe you want to speak to that quickly, but.
So you're right. You've got that perfectly right. They don't have a PRI, so they can't go into Phoenix. We're going to fix that. So we have an October enhancement release with Phoenix to allow military in DND and officers in the RCMP to allow for them to the ability to approve transactions for their non-military, non-officer employees. So that's a fix that'll be coming in October.
So in answer to your question, we are aware of many issues that we are addressing. It's very important that's why it's so important that employees reach out to us if they have a problem, because I can't guarantee you today that we are aware of the 100% of the issues. If we don't know about it, then, so that's why it's so important. We know, we think we know about just about all of them because we've been hearing a lot. We're logging them, we're processing them, we're dealing with when to address them. But it is important that employees do reach out and tell us. One, we can solve their problem quickly, and two, if it's an issue that we haven't encountered, we need to know because we need to be able to fix it.
So do you have the resources that you need in order to get to delivering on this? Or do you need more resources? So
right now, with the centers and everything, we feel that we have, but I can tell you that our minister has told us that she wants this fix, and for us to come up with the solutions, and there's not, like, we're not being held back as to resources and to put this to bed. So right now, I think the thing that we'll be monitoring the most closely is our pay center in Miramichi and when we reach, I'll say, the steady state. So when people are fully used to the system, when some of the automation comes in, when that flow is steady, that's when, and if we see that it's not, and we have the temporary units that we have are there to stay, and if we can get more compensation advisors, we said we would take as many as we can. And I know that the unions have actually put something on their website calling out to compensation advisors to reach out to us. That's been very helpful, and I hope that we get more. And if we get more, we'll bring them into the satellite units, and you'll see that timeline go down.
And my one last question, I have about a minute or 2 minutes left here that might take some time to explain. To me, and I think to a lot of people out there, in particular those who are affected by this, it seems very long, a long period of time to be asking people to wait to fix what is perceived as a simple problem. So can you walk me through what happens from the moment that somebody calls and creates a complaint or does it online? Why does it take so long to actually get things sorted out so that they start getting paid? Is it just a sheer matter of volume versus number of people to deal with the cases? What is making it take so long? I have an employee in my Parliament Hill office who started working for me on April the 18th. I signed the contract with her at the beginning of April. She got her first pay yesterday. She was beyond the 3 months probationary period before she even got paid once. So why does it take so long for for this stuff to get aligned properly?
I almost want to ask you who puts there in the system, but I'm not going to go
I
there.
put it into the system and it was done properly.
But in answer to your question, I really hope that as of, I'd say, last week, people that have pay issues are not waiting anymore. Like what you're referring to is that there was a period where we were assessing the size of the issues and the backlog and everything. So that period for us was the time when we realized that it was outstripping our capacity. We now have processes in place. So somebody who's not getting paid will not wait. Like if we have the information, they won't wait more than the next paycheck, 3 days in the next paycheck if we know. If we don't have the information, we have to go back to the department. There's things missing. The departments are very seized with this, and we will get it so that it's on the next one. So you shouldn't, I mean, the situation you described would not happen today if the person reaches out to us, let's say after 4 weeks, reaches out to us, then it would be either the following week, or the following paycheck, or if we're missing information after.
And what about shift work? People who are required to put in hours into Phoenix.
Yeah, the same thing.
And their manager has to approve it.
Same thing.
Same thing?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and my apologies, Mr. Gerson, I didn't welcome you to the committee, so welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Richards for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. I want to just kind of return to the sort of similar, because I'm still left really quite unclear at the end of this meeting, kind of what is being done to fix this issue. I mean, I'm going to start with, I was reading a CBC article that talks about a government call center that's been set up in Toronto, staffed by, and I'm just going to quote from it, staffed by 100 temp agency workers to answer the phones from the thousands of panicked workers calling in looking for answers. These temps who do not have security clearance and are largely charged with reading from a script are in place to reassure bureaucrats and provide updates on their file. They will not be able to resolve pay problems. And then it goes on to say that one of these scripts instructs them to tell public servants that if they inform the government of pay problems before June 1st, that there would be some sort of resolution by October. It doesn't seem to line up with what we're hearing today, I guess. I'm not, accusing anybody, but I'm just, what we're hearing anecdotally as well. We're hearing from people who saying that they haven't been paid for months. I've heard that from people in my riding, and I know it's being heard all across the country. And you've got call centers being set up just to tell people, well, gee, everything is going to be all right. But I would suspect for someone who's got a mortgage payment to make and they haven't got the money to make that mortgage payment, for example, or can't afford to feed their kids, maybe whatever it might be, I would think that just a little bit of reassurance from someone on a call center isn't going to really cut it. And so I guess I'm still sitting here thinking, after we've been here for an hour and a half now, I still don't have an understanding of what is being done to fix this issue, and I don't really get a sense that we're hearing that people are being paid and there's no one that hasn't gone without pay, but that's not what I'm hearing out there. So something seems to be lost in translation here, I guess. So can you give me a better sense? I still don't really understand what's being done to fix this issue, and I really question whether it sounds to me when you're getting thousands of calls at a call center, there must be people that still aren't being paid, and it's been months. So can we get a better sense as to what is being done to fix this? Because I still don't
So
get it.
I wish I could give you the simple answer. But this, again, I go back to the fact that this is not a simple, it's not a simple transformation, right?
Understood.
And it's a system that has many, many components. So that's why we're touching all these different components at the same time to make sure that at the end, all the components are functioning so that the system works perfectly. So that's why you're hearing different things, right? When we're talking about the temporary units, that's the capacity for the backlog, for the transactions, and it could be overflow if we need it for a bit for Miramichi. When we talk about education and we talk about manager and employee, I'll say education, but change management and the tools that we're going to be producing very, very shortly to them, that's for the user itself to make the transaction easier, because if the transaction is not done properly, the system will reject it and create an issue that then will create a backlog. So getting the first step is actually very important. And on the software side, we're working very closely with IBM to make sure that a lot of the enhancements that we're looking at are all done on time or faster, that we're going to be looking at every little issue that's raised, because there are issues and we're addressing them. And the programming, if something is done not the way that we thought we should do it one way and now it's another way, we'll address that. So we're working on all the fronts. The call center was meant to relieve Miramichi, we had heard a lot of complaints that people weren't getting through. It was taking over 30 minutes at that one point.
You wouldn't get in. Your call would be dropped.
So they couldn't reach the call center. And that's when we decided to create the web form and to push people to communicate with us through the web form. It turned out that people still were calling to the call center, and we didn't know how many calls were actually not getting through. So what we did when creating the call center in Toronto is that people can actually do a first screen and talk to the employee. If it is a Category 1, Category 2, or a case that needs to be transmitted to the pay center, it's done through a form to this pay center. But you might find this fact interesting. The first day, and we did this on Monday. So Monday there were
Can you tell me what was the date that was set up, the web form?
The web form. The web form. The date of the web form? I think it's beginning of June, but I'd have to come back to you.
Okay, and then the call center...
So the call center was Monday.
Okay.
Tuesday morning,
sorry.
7 a.m.
And Tuesday...
Can you give me a rough sense of the web form? Like, we're talking when that was set up? Like, can you give me a rough idea? I know you can't give me the exact date, but...
We've always had, the one we promoted was recent, about 4 weeks now.
4 weeks?
I'm pretty
Roughly?
sure it's about that, but we had another form on the site, but only for pay center clients, employees who were administered out of the pay center. We had that form there right from the outset.
But this one was one that we promoted to employees to give us the information. So the call center, though, the fact that I think is interesting is the first day they received 1,700 calls, and only 1,000 needed to have cases transmitted to the Miramichi Pay Center. So that means, the way I interpret this, there was at least 700 people that didn't necessarily need to talk to a compensation advisor within the next 48 hours. So that might be a really good thing, because that means there's a triage there.
Just interrupt you for a second. Can you give me a sense as to what would be some of the reasons for that? Like, you're saying that 700 didn't need to, but what criteria determines whether they didn't need to call?
Give an example.
Does it mean that they were in fact paid, or what does it mean?
So we encourage people to call the pay center, even if they are going on mat leave and want to know what documentation they need to fill out. So in that case, we take down their information, we send them their forms to fill out.
So you're saying that those 700 then would all be people who this wasn't an issue for. It wasn't this specific issue, it was some other pay issue that they had, or questions.
Question. We don't. It's not all pay issues. A lot of them are pay questions. They just don't know how to navigate the complexities of the collective agreement, and we can just point them to the website.
The good thing about that, it means that it liberates the people at the Miramichi Pay Center to actually get the cases that they need to work on and to go through. So we're hoping that's going to be a great addition.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Weir, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I asked about the advisability of using off-the-shelf IBM software to run federal payrolls, the answer was that this approach was a proven success. But aren't there many examples, both within Canada and around the world, of IBM encountering problems trying to run public sector payrolls? I'm thinking, for example, of a lawsuit between the Australian state of Queensland and IBM over a somewhat similar boondoggle there.
Yeah, I'm not aware of what IBM's experience is in other jurisdictions. When the decision was made to go with different options for a pay system, this was back in 2009, a number of options were examined, and it was felt that a commercial off-the-shelf product would be the best route to go. A competitive process was run, and IBM came to the table with PeopleSoft, which I believe is one of the largest people's HR management systems in the world. As well, the Government of Canada was going with the HR system PeopleSoft as well. So it was felt best to have the HR and the pay system would be best able to talk together if it was using the same software.
Sure. Now, when you say you're not familiar with the experience of IBM around the world doing public sector payrolls, presumably that's something that the government looked at in making this decision?
In 2009, I'm sure they did, but I don't know the specifics on that. I wasn't in the department then.
Okay, if you could come back to the committee with a bit more information on those international comparisons, I would certainly welcome it. I suppose now that we're into this mess, I wonder what kind of liability or contractual obligations IBM might have to try to fix the problem.
Yeah. Again, I think I'll go back to the deputy's opening remarks. It's a system of systems. And our experience to date is that the software is functioning as we told IBM to program it. So for example, we didn't tell IBM to make sure that military service numbers could be used, and that's something that we should have done as a department. But the IBM software is working as it was supposed to. They have a contract. If there are warranty issues which are a result of their fault, they fix them at no charge to the Government of Canada. But as I said, the software is working. It's really the system, if you combine all the parts, which is managers, individuals, HR specialists, that's where we have to get the system working better together so that people understand exactly what has to be done to get a pay transaction going. So there's lots of examples of where we have room to improve.
So will the government be making public the terms and conditions of the contract with IBM that you mentioned?
I'm not sure if we make, I think it's commercially confident, and we'd have confidentiality with the firm, and we'd have to get the firm's permission to do that.
Okay, because I mean, this seems like an aspect of the issue that maybe merits further exploration. But I guess you're suggesting the problem is not with the software, but with the utilization of the software. In that vein, I guess I would ask whether Miramichi was the right place to locate the Phoenix Pay Center.
There were a number of options studied and a number of criteria. Did they have enough people? What was the population base, bilingual capacity, that type of thing? And a number of options were presented to the government at the time. And Miramichi fit all the criteria of those options when that decision was made.
Okay, I mean, it's been reported that a number of people that had expertise in federal payrolls were unable to relocate to Miramichi. Was that a problem in the implementation of Phoenix?
I believe, I'll ask Rosanna to comment, but it was anticipated that not everyone would want to move from Winnipeg or Ottawa or Edmonton to the pay center. The training program was designed to take that into account and to train people from scratch, and it was a new system as well. So
we did put in place a professional development program because we had estimated that very few people were going to actually move to the Miramichi. And the training program was lengthy. It was 2 years. It went for 2 years, and so the movement of employee accounts to Miramichi was done very deliberately in small little pieces to allow the compensation advisors to learn compensation. As the deputy mentioned, 27 collective agreements and 80,000 business rules are difficult to digest all at once, and it did take a 2-year program. And we brought 460 individuals through that program over a few years.
Okay, but it seems not to have worked, and I wonder if the current approach of setting up these supplementary pay centers in Gatineau and other parts of the country implicitly acknowledges that trying to centralize the whole payroll operation in Miramichi didn't make sense.
Our assessment is not that it has not worked. Our assessment is that the transition is where the issue is, and the transition to the Phoenix system and the learning curve of everyone involved. So whether it would be in Miramichi or Ottawa or Chibougamau, it would be the same issue that people would have to deal with. So the temporary units are temporary until we have the steady state.
So speaking of those temporary units, I guess I want to just pick up on the CBC report that Mr. Richards also referenced about employees being hired at some of these temporary centers not necessarily having proper training with Phoenix or proper expertise. Do you have any response to that report?
So I'm not sure what report you're referring to, but the compensation advisors have compensation advisor experience. They get training on Phoenix when we onboard them. So that's an onboarding thing. Because there's been confusion, I think, in the media between the Toronto call center and the temporary units where we actually process cases with compensation advisors. So as we discussed earlier, the Toronto is a call center. So it's people that don't have access to the information of employees, to their data. They're not analyzing. They take the information and they transmit it to the pay center. So those people are the people that don't need to have that same training.
Thank you very much. Monsieur Drouin, 7 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ms. May, for accepting our invitation to appear before the committee. I know that there are some who would like to have heard from the minister, but often I know that when ministers appear at committees, they turn to their left or their right to get expertise, and I know that we have expertise in front of us here today. So I just, with my question, want to bring you back. When you tested various scenarios, I think you said 16,000 scenarios were tested, but were those only scenarios that worked? What happened when scenarios did not work? And I see here that you've established a plan. Was this plan already established a year ago when we're planning the transformation to the Phoenix Pay system? Well, I think there are two aspects to the question, but I'll maybe check with Gavin or Lydia. Gavin or Rosanna? Well, the 16,000 scenarios, we went over the 16,000 scenarios, and the reason why we weren't live last year is because there were too many problems identified in the scenarios, some major critical problems that did not allow us to go forward with the new Phoenix system at that time. And so that's why we delayed the go-live date. But already at that time, last July, had you already established a plan to say, oh, this is priority 1, 2, or 3? At that time, were you anticipating these sorts of problems? No. No. The categories and the plan that you see in front of you are things that we've created quite recently following an analysis of the size of the backlog and the decision to put in place the temporary pay units to address this issue. And as I said earlier, the fact that people aren't being paid, for us, that's unacceptable. And that's something that we had not expected. And so for us, it was important to find a way to find a shortcut, if you will, to help them to ensure that they are paid. And so that's what led us to create these priorities, the priority 1, 2, and 3 categories, and also to create this schedule to deal with the backlog. Well, you're absolutely right. To people who aren't being paid, that's unacceptable. And is it possible that there's an employee who is both priority 1 and then also priority number 2 because of another problem? And I was speaking to somebody this morning, one of my constituents, who was paid this week, but who still, for example, is not receiving the bilingualism bonus. Is that a priority 3 problem? When will that be fixed? Well, yes, indeed, it's quite possible that people would be in several priority categories. I think that normally what we try to do is, if somebody is in priority 1 and has other problems, we try to fix all the problems at the same time. That is our goal, but last week we might not have been able to do that in every case, but our goal is to fix every problem with each case when possible. How many pay advisors have you hired since the beginning of the crisis? Well, we've added 40 people in Miramichi. They were added in January. And at this time, we have 57 employees in Gatineau, but we will have 115 who will be coming in the coming weeks. So that's 115. There will be 20 with up to 50 in Winnipeg and another 40. So about 240 in the pay centres, along with the 40 that were already hired in Miramichi. And how did you create this deadline? Under priority number 3 in your table, how will you be able to say at the end of October, the end of November, that you've fixed all the problems? How did you create this schedule? Well, people have done very diligent work with the numbers that we've given you, and with the forecasts we have in the different centres to share the workload and to determine how the work will be done. So every centre has a certain number or a certain number of transactions to deal with, and they will do that. And in some cases, and of course we know that one unit might have 20, another might have 40, so they'll have different levels of productivity. And of course there's a bit of training to be done. So everything, all of that was taken into account, training and numbers, when we came up with this deadline. Our great hope is that we'll be able to fix things even more quickly. And it's important to remember that we're starting to fix the problems. So you're going to have people whose problems will be fixed tomorrow and not in October. So we're dealing with issues as we go. It won't just all be done in October. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the only this is the only partisan thing I'm going to say today, but these are quite conservative numbers. That's the only partisan thing I'll say. Small c, conservative. The pay center that you have in Toronto, or the call center rather, that you have in Toronto, they're filtering calls? So are you encouraging employees to call that call center? Well, the first thing that it does is that we know how many people want or need to talk to the pay center. Because before Tuesday, as Mr. Liddy was saying, there were people out there who were calling and we didn't even know they were calling because they couldn't get through. So now everyone's going to be able to talk to someone. That's point number one. Second point is that it allows us to proceed with a triage of calls. And as I said earlier, with the numbers that we saw Tuesday, it shows that not everyone needs to talk to a pay advisor. So that means that the pay advisors in Miramichi will be able to work on the files where their work is needed. And what we're hoping is that with the call center, this will free up the pay advisors to work on those files, while other files can be dealt with by people who don't have the same experience or qualification. So what this will also allow for, the commitment we've taken is that if people call the pay center and they're identified as being under priority 1 or 2, within 48 hours, somebody from Miramichi is going to call them back. And so they'll get a follow-up on their file. And so if people called Miramichi, there was no way to know if the person was waiting online and they hung up because they couldn't get a hold of anyone. There was absolutely no way that you could take that into account. No. And now, can you do that? Yes, now we know exactly how many calls we get. We know how long they have to wait, and the wait time is less than 4 minutes. So this is 1,000 times better than it was. All right, thank you very much.
We're going to go into the 5-minute round. I would just remind all members again that we will continue to ask questions as long as needed, but we do have Madame Lackey and Madame Davian waiting to answer questions you may have of them as well. We will go now to Mr. Richards for 5 minutes.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just have actually one quick question. I think my colleague might have one or two as well, so I'll pass my time to him if I have some left, and I expect I will. I just kind of wanted to return to where it was at the end of the last chance I had to have an intervention. And I think it just, we'd be remiss if we didn't leave. I'm sure there's hundreds, if not thousands, of civil servants paying attention to what's occurring here today. Those who have been left without pay, wanting to make sure they have answers. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't have the answer to this question for them. And I know we kind of touched around the edges of it earlier in the question I think it was Mr. Graywall had asked, but I wanted to just ask it directly and give you an opportunity to respond, because I think it's important that public servants that are watching have the answer to this question, and it's in regards to the reimbursement of expenses. There's expenses that people would have incurred as a result of not being paid, and I know you indicated that was going to be addressed and going to be fixed, but I wonder if you can tell them when they can expect to see reimbursement of those expenses as a result of this rushed implementation.
What I can tell you at this time is that discussions are ongoing as we speak between Treasury Board, the union. Like, it's really, like, people are seized with this. There's a real desire to be able to share a process very quickly, but I don't have a date, but it will be imminent, I believe, because it is a real issue, and we all recognize that.
Well, I appreciate the word imminent. I hadn't really heard anything else that gave me any sense, and I appreciate that. I hope that is accurate and that's meant in the way that I would take it to be meant, because these are obviously real people, they're real lives, there's real consequences here, there's real expenses, and they need to be paid as quickly as possible. And I hope if anything we've left that impression today. I'm sure you're well aware of that, but I hope if anything we've left the impression that how urgent and important that is that these people be treated fairly and expeditiously with what they need and what they require. So with that, I'll leave it and turn it over to my colleague, Mr. McCauley.
Great. Just following up on Mr. Richards' question, I think we heard earlier today it was about 15 to 20 million in added costs we were looking at addressing all of this. These various fees and that we're going to cover for all of our civil servants, is that in that 15, 20, or is that on top?
Just to be precise, the 15 to 20 is for the, like I'll say the one-offs, like the satellite center, the call center. So that would be on top. And also, we're looking at how can we work differently, either with partner enhancement, we might have additional costs there. Remembering again that the savings that were supposed to occur this year are in the order of 70 million, and it was every year from that.
Right. No, I just want to see if it's in that total. If we could just walk back quickly, you had mentioned we did earlier testing of 16,000 test cases, and there was, did I hear right, before we went live, we did 16,000, but there were some issues involved that we pushed the implementation back? Was that correct?
Yeah, maybe I'll let Mr. Libby, he can walk you through.
If it's just correct, and what the date was on the testing.
Yeah, so the testing was a May 2015 checkpoint, and that was the decision where are we going to go live in October and December, which was the first implementation dates, because this is, at that point in time, we'd been at it for about 70 months. It was a 79-month project. So at that point in time, the number of defects that we found in the system that were critical were too high to risk going with either the pilot even and to go live. So that is when we started to engage in, at least at my level with IBM, to get through those defects. And by September, we felt we had cleared all of the defects that were critical. There were still a number of outstanding ones, which we could have workarounds for. This means more people in the pay center, and we were actually using the pension center to augment that as well. Right. And then the next effort was to try and get that number of people down and really, hold IBM's, feet to the fire to deliver without defects. So by September, we felt we had cleared those defects, and that any of the remaining ones that we had would not have impacted the system, or we had effective workarounds to deal with them. And we worked all the way through till mid-January and cleared progressively from September to mid-January those defects.
Yeah, was it at that point in mid-January, because you commented earlier, all the ADMs across the spectrum said, yes, let's go.
Yeah,
it was after you cleared off all those.
So we were also looking at we were really focused on cleaning the backlog. Was part of the September discussion we had with deputies, was can we clear the backlog? Are your people ready? So we had a lot of training packages. I think we now know that they weren't probably adequate enough. We had a lot of change management we were trying to get departments to do as well. So that was it. And then we went through the fall managing that in regular consultations. Rosanna was talking about weekly meetings. I had meetings with heads of HR and chief financial officers.
I don't expect you to... That's 5 minutes?
More than that, Mr. McCauley. Okay. Mr. Grewal, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only have one question, Deputy Minister Lemay. It's very much focused on my colleague's question on resources and resource allocation to make sure that we can try to do better than we're doing right now. I know a lot of progress has been made, and the focus has always been on getting these people paid. So is there anything else from a resource perspective that we could be doing to get these people their paychecks quicker? Because, like my colleague said, the average person affected by this will be like, okay, I worked, so I should get paid. Why can't they just cut me a check? And that's my rationale on it as well, because I'll give you a personal example. When you become an elected member of parliament, and you're onboarded, I wonder who signs our paperwork, by the way. Your first paycheck comes in the mail, even if your information has been sent in. So there is a process already in the government that has check printed somewhere in the government. So why isn't that process being used here on emergency situations?
I will say to you that the one part where I want us to focus more attention or drill down is really on that portion of it, like I'll say the onboarding, I'll talk it like that. I talked about the students, but it's not just the students. And really getting to the bottom of, are there other things that we can do? So that will be a separate, put a little bit of a tire team on that, because that seems to be an issue that is really there and that we have to get really resolved. In the meantime, though, again, people, and this is fairly recent, the people that do not get paid now have a process to get to us and to get their paycheck in a fairly quick, and if it's not fast enough, there is the emergency salary advance. So in terms of adding resources, I would say we are hoping to get more compensation advisors, because the call is out there to get, so we will take as many as we can get. We are also, in terms of resources, we're going to be really focusing on the training. So that's another set of resources that we are going to be working differently with IBM too. I mean, we've had serious conversations in the last few weeks about really partnering, and they have a real desire to see this succeed, and they absolutely want to be helping. And so there's a number of things in terms of in terms of resources, whether they're human or financial, that we will be putting towards the project. And that's why the full amount of the cost will probably have to be for another committee meeting, but there's a number of pieces that we're looking at.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'm going to pass the remainder of my time on to my good colleague, Mr. Whalen.
To Mr. Whalen. Mr. Whalen, you've got a couple of minutes.
Okay, so I just want to follow up a little bit on some of the questions earlier. I'm going to want to look back a little bit, but it's because I want to make sure that we're appropriately staffed going forward. And maybe I'm trying to wrap my head around the decision to delay implementation of Phoenix by 4 months and the termination notices sent out 2 days before the election on October 17th, and whether or not the decision to delay had become decoupled from the staffing. How that decision was made, because I want to make sure that we maintain staffing levels until this problem is resolved and people get paid. It seems to me that that decision on October 17th to terminate employees should have been tied more closely to when Phoenix was going to roll out, and maybe Mr. Liddy can speak to that.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was tied to that, because those people, Rosanna, you can correct me if I'm wrong, would have been laid off earlier. So we actually delayed laying people off because we made the decision in September to delay the rollout by 4 months. So the layoff notices were delayed in that case.
Were they delayed by 4 months?
I don't know the specifics. Rosanna, do you know?
Department by department. Every department decided when the layoff notices would go out. So it was not a central decision.
So even though the decision on whether or not to roll out Phoenix was centralized at 4 months, the notices, it sounds like they went out quite a bit earlier than that.
Department A was going to roll out in October. They would have laid people off much earlier than October. Some departments decided to keep compensation advisors as a buffer. Others decided to keep, 10%, 20%. So it depended on what the department thought the risks were and the complexity of their pay. So I know in Health Canada, they kept on compensation advisors within the department because of the number of people of northern allowances, nurses, that type of thing.
Okay, so I can sort of see that maybe we might see where our 20,000 backlog might have come from. Back to the earlier questions to Ms. DiPaolo, you were talking about the sort of the pilot period, the 34 departments. It seems to me that the departments chosen were the ones most closely aligned with Phoenix already, and that it wouldn't have been a representative group by which to judge how the project would roll out across departments that weren't so closely aligned with Phoenix. Do you think using a pilot project on a more closely aligned subset of the departments actually created false expectations when they didn't show the same number of errors that we're seeing now?
So although we went live with that first grouping to keep the rollout tight and we can explore a variety of potential issues. All departments joined us on our testing during our testing phase. We had a 15-month testing phase, and all 101 departments, we had a variation of departments that came in to test with us. The 34 departments did include the vast majority of the automated rules that we had in Phoenix. That was what made them so attractive to go live with. So the 80,000 business rules we programmed into the system were almost all entirely used up during that rollout. There were nothing new was added to Phoenix in the second rollout. It's the same software, only rolled out twice.
I have to interrupt there, but again, if you have subsequent or follow-up questions, we'll get to them. I have Mr. Richards down on my list, but I see Mr. Richards has departed, so we'll go with Mr. McCauley.
Back to the testing, Mr. Liddy. The 16,000, I realize you don't recall or won't know every single one we tested. Can I assume that the major issues we're facing now did not come up during that testing period?
Yeah, that's correct. Did not.
And to me, the short-term pay grade changes, the fill-ins, et cetera, are a huge part of day-to-day going on in government. Did we just miss it?
No, we didn't.
Testing something so common?
So I'll give you an example. Today, if you're acting, it's automatic. So that system works within Phoenix. What we had was about, how many, Rosanna? 42,000 actings that weren't part of the rollout, like they were sort of back actings from before Phoenix. So we didn't have a system except manually to enter those in, and that became part of the workload. So the acting thing works. We just didn't have an ability to take retroactive actings and do it in an automated fashion.
Okay. We heard earlier there was 20,000 backlog and then 20,000 added on. I may have heard wrong, but I wrote down my notes. We didn't know there was backlog of 20,000. How could we have not have known there was such huge backlog? I'm sure there's not just one person hiding it in a closet somewhere in surprise. I mean, that's a huge amount. I mean, someone somewhere would have said, hey, we've got to enter these things.
Well, when we talk to heads of HR and they know about the backlog that they've been told about and they're acting on, but each individual manager may have appointed someone for 3 days to be enacting AS2 to AS3 and may not have put that in the system. Same thing with, certain, like leave without pay. Somebody may have taken leave without pay, but that wasn't entered into the system. So even the heads of HR don't know in each individual manager's decision and when they've taken it. And when you add that up
back
across...
in 2014, we would have probably the same 20,000 backlog. I'm sure it's not just an
Maybe.
overnight thing. How could we have... I assume this has been going on forever. How could we have not have known that this existed? Because it wasn't an overnight thing that happened.
So the difference here is that leading up to the Phoenix implementation, as we've heard, like departments were getting ready and I'll say cleaning up and getting the information out. So that happened in a fairly short time. Exactly. So it wasn't an ongoing normal process. It just came in at the end.
Between, say, January and February, March?
No. Because when we consolidated into the pay center, we asked departments to clean up the backlog so that when the compensation function moved from your department to Miramichi, even before Phoenix, they didn't inherit a large backlog. And then the same thing happened when we were going to Wave 1 and Wave 2 in Phoenix, was we asked departments to clear out the backlog.
But it wasn't clear.
Well, I know departments put extraordinary efforts in doing it,
but it wasn't cleared.
But it wasn't completely cleared.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. And it sounds like that snowballed into a lot of other issues.
Yeah. And then you take, new compensation advisors,
Looking back, or common sense, we would have said, to follow up, hey, did you clear everything?
Well, we
missed that. Okay. 1 minute. Just a very quick question. I know you mentioned earlier working with the PSAC and the other union partners. Are you still continuing working with that? Because I'm reading Twitter feeds and I realize it's Twitter, but there's still comments coming, no, that's not correct, that's not correct. What mechanism do we have to keep in very close contact? Because I realize there's a web page you can call in, but they're often the very first point of contact for a lot of our workers in the government. How are we communicating with them to make sure that we're not going down this path when, hey, we've overlooked this, like we overlooked the backlog?
So there are several ways. As I think I said that when I first joined, I met with the 5 heads of unions, and we decided to the 2 of the representative would meet with me on a regular basis, and we did that with 2 of the union representatives from probably about 4 or 5 weeks. More recently, there's been discussions with.
When did that start, in April?
Yeah,
Okay.
when April. My first was April, with the 5 heads of unions was April 25th, I believe. And at that point, what I was looking for is to get the information that they were hearing so that we could feed into the system. So that's why we had established some lines of communication and actually special email address so that they could give us some of the information that we were getting. And that worked at the beginning well, but again, at one point, it just, the backlog and the situation outstripping our capacity was such that even that wasn't a channel that was sufficient, and that's when we had to create the web form. So with the unions, my colleague at Treasury Board is obviously very much involved, so between the 2 of us, there's discussions. We are committed to meeting again, and we've just recently talked to the PSAC members, president, to have a kind of ongoing committee so we can share some of these, the ongoing changes and things that we're doing, as they've been very good with the compensation advisors. As you know, they've been helping. They've got it on their website. So that conversation is happening. It's extremely important. I'll be honest with you, we have been spending like 18 hours days on this, so we're running as and hoping we can get to a state where we can have a little bit more back to a little bit more formal discussions on this.
But I would also add that the union engagement started as soon as the consolidation decision was made, and the union was part of discussions, and Rosanna has all the details, but on a regular basis as we move through the project. So.
Okay.
Monsieur Ayoub.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to share my time with Madame Mertenzi, if you may. Quelques petites questions rapides.
Just a few quick questions. Will Phoenix reduce the amount of time before an employee is paid for the first time? The 4 weeks that you mentioned earlier, that seems quite long to me. Will Phoenix reduce the amount of time before an employee is paid for the first time? That's my question. I won't go for it any further. Well, I'll give you my personal evaluation of that. What's clear is that now it's immediate, whereas before, indeed, it took a longer amount of time. Before we were at 6 weeks, and now we're talking about 3 to 4 weeks. But I'll go back to what I said a little earlier. I think that what the implementation of the system shows us is that it shed light on the problems that were in the system even before Phoenix. And in my opinion, that is indeed a problem. So how can we ensure that the amount of time is the shortest possible? Even if we get 2 extra weeks with Phoenix, we're going to have to be very careful with that and pay close attention to that. So this is an opportunity that we need to seize. We need to be able to go further with this information. And in terms of pay, what's expected in your plan in terms of compensation that will be given to employees who had a very long delay before being paid? Well, this is an issue that has been brought up and which is very important. Our colleagues at the Treasury Board, in discussion with the unions, are looking at how this will be done. There will be a process, but we don't have the details of that yet. The idea is that it will be announced, and we're asking employees to keep any relevant documents as long as possible, and soon we'll explain what process they'll be able to follow. Thank you. I will now cede the floor to Ms. Ratansi.
Thank you so much. I just have a couple of questions to clear my mind. So we have been hearing about the problems with Phoenix, and it has started since since the process was brought into play in 2009 under the Conservative government, and repeated suggestions and issues raised by the Public Service Commission and others about the system. And then the system does move, and you have tested it, the bugs are tested, $310 million is sunk in. If you were told midway when Minister Foote said she was assured that Phoenix had been rigorously tested and the staff were well trained, if you were to advise the minister to not implement phase 2, what would have been the consequences? What would have happened?
It was strongly felt that the risk of people not getting paid or not properly paid outweighed the risk of actually moving to the phase 2. So the risk was serious. The system, it was an old one. People were working on 2 systems. There was training that needed and education that needed, learning curve about the new system. It was, and it's one of those processes that once you have everybody on the same site and on the same system, you can actually reorganize the work, have it done by clusters. You can do the training in a different way, which we were able to start doing after. So it was a big risk.
So in hindsight, with these problems of the 750 people not getting paid and 80,000 employees not getting that extra pay, would you have given different advice to the minister?
I think I said earlier, what I would have seen is the same, like moving to phase 2, but I would have recommended that we prepare better the users of the system. I think the change management and I'll say the educational component of the employees and managers, because it is a very different system to use. It changes your way of managing people because you have to go in the system and do a click and an approve, and if you don't, it sits there. It's not about a form that somebody else, there's a number of changes that are important that I think we underestimated, so I would have put more resources, more efforts there, and I think I would have kept also more compensation advisors for the transition to help until it's stabilized and then get back to the steady state.
Thank you.
Minute round over to Mr. Weir.
Well, Deputy Minister LeMay, when you say the problem was with the users of the system rather than the system itself, I wonder how much larger would the problem need to be for you to acknowledge that there was a problem with the actual system?
So I don't believe I said the problems with the users. If I did, what I meant was the problem is about the users getting used to the system. So I'm not blaming the users. I'm actually blaming us for not preparing properly the users for the use of the system. So I think we missed on this. So that's not on the users. It's on us. I have not said that there's no problems with the software.
Okay,
I think there are issues on every component of the larger system. And the software issues, when they come up, we have to address them. So all the components are...
So we've touched on the fact that PSAC recommended a delay in the implementation of Phoenix. Did anyone else recommend a delay in the implementation?
No. No, we had discussions with Treasury Board Secretariat and all the deputy community and the Privy Council Office, Department of Finance.
So IBM didn't recommend a delay?
No, the IBM recommended a delay when in May of 2015. And we did delay as a result of their recommendation.
Okay.
We asked them that we didn't think they were ready, frankly, and what do you recommend we do about that? Can you put more resources on to keep the schedule, or do you recommend a delay? And they said we recommend a delay.
Okay, but not since then?
No.
Okay. Now, we've talked about some of the costs of setting up these temporary pay centers. Mr. Greywall rightly pointed out that there will be costs of compensating employees who've incurred penalties as a result of not being paid. Can you provide any kind of overall estimate of the total cost of this Phoenix boondoggle?
At this point, we cannot provide the cost of the compensation.
Okay, but any sort of sense of the overall magnitude of what this is going to cost Canadian taxpayers all told?
So what we have right now is the measures that we've taken. So the satellite and the call centers and the measures that we've taken right now, it's 15 to 20. We're in the process of looking at other things, so we'll certainly be able to add to be able to provide the additional cost. And as soon as we have the other process in place, we'll be able to also have a sense of the magnitude.
If you could keep this committee up to date on those costs, I think we'd greatly appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is the completion of the second round. My understanding is from the government side, Mr. Gerritsen has a question. From the official opposition side, Mr. McCauley, you've got 2 or 3 questions. Mr. Weir, I'm not sure if you've got further questions. I'm actually trying to get a sense for Madame Lackey and Madame Davian when they might be coming forward. So we have a question here. Might take a few minutes. Mr. McCauley, do you think you need 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
Well, it depends on the length of the answer.
Sure. Mr. Weir, are you done?
I think so, I guess, unless something really compelling comes out of these final questions.
All right, let's see if we can wrap this up then, with 2 last speakers. Mr. Gerritsen, please.
I just want to, Mr. Chair, with the witnesses here having been here for 2.5 hours, I think we should be mindful of that. Thank you.
That's another way of saying what I think I just said, but yes, very much so. Mr. Gerritsen, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just a quick question, and it relates to the regional offices. One of the main complaints that I've received over the last 4 months is with the move away from the regional offices to the centralized location in Miramichi, that there no longer is that point of contact. And sometimes, quite often I think, it was very beneficial because if you worked in corrections, and your point of contact was in a region that understood how corrections employees were paid, it was a lot easier to help deal with the issues. I just want to hear from you that you're confident that when the rollout of Phoenix is complete and the issues have been resolved and we're moving forward, that you believe that Phoenix will still be able to deliver the same kind of quality of human resource interaction with the employees that they were receiving with the regional offices?
So Phoenix is not built the same way, right? It's a lot of a self-serve system, and that's the principle behind it, is that you do a lot yourself, you have access to things, your manager goes in, so it's not that same interaction that you used to have. So to say that it will be the same thing, I think would be wrong. But
sorry, I'm not asking if it's the same thing, okay. But if the employee will have the same access to the same types of resources.
Okay. Do you want to, yes, they will in Miramichi? And
yes, so the model is different. It used to be that you go down the hall to visit your compensation advisor and chat about, doing whatever you needed to do, going off on leave. And that model has shifted to one of self-service and one where you put in a request and the pay center in Miramichi provides you with the service. It's meant to be a lot quicker, a lot more efficient, a lot more consistent. That's the model of a centralized grouping of people. They're experts on corrections is unique in that it has very specific rules, and they've been built into Phoenix as a technology, but the compensation advisors in Miramichi understand those collective agreements very well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please.
The backlog, when we discovered this massive backlog, which we're hearing now is a cause of a lot of the problems with Phoenix, with the pay and everything. What actions did we take in April when it came up? It doesn't sound like we informed the minister because she was still advising us in middle of May, everything's fine apart from 77 isolated people.
So we've got to remember that the backlog, we talked about 2 components, right? We talked about the transactions that were still in the system not completed, and we talked about the extra duty pay that was forwarded after. But there's also the portion of the learning curve, and we knew that would happen, right? A bit of a slowdown as the system is put in place. So that portion, we expected some. And that's where that's why it took a bit of time to figure out.
But it sounded like this unknown backlog of 20,000 really threw a wrench into plans.
Again, it's a series of things, right? It's not one issue, and I wish it would be just one, but it's a number of things, and that's why at the beginning we were expecting some slow down, if you want, the productivity, and then we were looking at the complaints, and we were just, and that's why we weren't able to.
I may misinterpret. I thought it was bigger than it's sounding now, but it's just part of the overall problems. Okay. Quickly, April 25th, you mentioned you had a first meeting with PSAC. Do you recall, and I'm sorry, it's a long time ago, do you recall what issues were brought forward? Because again, all of us in this committee heard repeatedly, it's only 77, it's a great program, everything is good, don't worry, it's being addressed. Then it blows up in June, now it's blowing up more and more and more. Again,
so can I start just by saying that that relationship with the unions for us is extremely important. This was day 14 for me, and it was very important to meet with them because I wanted to hear from them, to have a conversation about what they were hearing. What I remember our conversation being was that they raised with me the issue that can we not go to phase 2? Unfortunately, phase 2 was already done, but again, I wouldn't have. We go back to the recommendation. We were already in the system, and going to phase 2 was I believe, the right decision.
Can I just have one last quick question after that, but just quickly on this one, was the government, were we aware of what PSAC was saying, or it was kind of too late anyways, and we just had to tackle these issues as they came up?
If I was aware, sorry.
No, was, say, Minister Foote aware? Because again, one of the issues that we're having is we heard for so long, it's only 77, don't worry, it's being tackled. It was a lot bigger. I'm just wondering, how for months we thought it was just 77 people, but in fact it was a lot more. Like, how do we miss these other 80,000?
Again, it's not I don't want to say we're comparing apples and oranges. It's not but the 77 was the complaints that we were tracking through the pay center, and if you remember what I said earlier about the getting the information from the users as much as we could, the issues that were out there, we got some. Actually, the unions were very vocal in mid-June with providing through the minister and others some of the issues that they were hearing, and that's when we actually decided to create the form and promote the form, I should say, because we realized, oh my goodness, there's a lot of information.
77 was only what came through the pay center.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And just very quickly, I'm probably out of time, but how are you set up for come tax time if there's issues from 2015 that we're back paying, but they're going to,
we have our colleagues from finance are also involved in the discussions that we have. Our objective is to clear everything that we can before the end of the year, because that's obviously the ideal situation.
And that was more of a good luck with the question.
But we have colleagues, like I said, finance departments involved also, so we've whole of government approach on this one.
Okay.
Thank you. Madame Lemay, Madame De Paula, and Monsieur Liddy, thank you so much for coming. I hesitate to say good luck because that would imply that luck is required in your efforts to remedy the situation, but I know on behalf of all of the committee members and on behalf of every single government employee, we wish you the best of luck in getting the situation fixed. And I know you have expressed yourself quite eloquently that you were seized with this. I assume that you and your expertise will do everything in your powers to get this quickly resolved.
That's a commitment that we're making to you.
Thank you very much. We will suspend for just a couple of moments and then ask Madame Alaki and Madame Davian to please approach the table. of the Government Services Union. And Debbie, is it Davial? Thank you. President, Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada. And we'll start with Madame Lackey, if you have opening comments, please.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting us here today to speak. I am the President of Government Services Union, one of the components within the Public Service Alliance of Canada, and we represent the pay administration and certainly the Miramichi pay transformation that's embedded within Miramichi and the compensation advisors. We are working very, very, very closely, and we have for the last 5 years with the former PWGSC, now PSPC, in the rollout of the pay transformation. We support pay transformation. We see the value in the pay transformation. 5 years ago, we struck a committee with the employer, with the PSPC, called the Transformation of Pay Modernization Union Management Consultation Committee, and we meet on a quarterly basis. For the last 5 years, we have attended those meetings, myself and Chris Aylworth, the National Executive Vice President of the PSAC, to talk about issues in relation to the transformation. As we went through each wave of transformation, as we went through the training with the new hired consultants and the compensation advisors, and we became very, very close with this new community of compensation advisors. There are between 400 and 420 compensation advisors at any one time in Miramichi administering pay. I will tell you that it is one of the most complicated jobs one could possibly imagine. The majority of the people who work in Miramichi are recent hires. They're new to government, and they're certainly new to the pay community. Learning 27 collective agreements, administering federal government pay with 27 different bargaining agents is a phenomenal task. And I've got almost 30 years in government, and I can imagine what it must be like to be hired off the street to learn this task. And the pressure of rollout. Knowing when the program of Phoenix was to roll out, the transfer and the wave of files that would come through was just extraneous. People couldn't keep up with it. So from my perspective, the biggest struggle that we suffered was trying to get the employer to slow down. We met numerous times and asked them, we see the value, we understand the intent and the outcome of this project, but we're getting calls on a daily basis from broken compensation advisors in Miramichi. We have people emotionally upset, we have people crying coming to work, crying going home at night, and they fear for losing their jobs. They value the jobs they've received in the Miramichi. They're very proud to be working for the Government of Canada, and the pressure they take home every night must be very burdensome to their families as well. So we approached the department and asked them to ease up. Just ease up on that last rollout of files, that last transfer of 130,000 files, please ease up. Let them get caught up because they don't understand. They're struggling to deliver pay. But the rollout went ahead. I understand there's an obligation on the behalf of the government to issue pay on a timely basis. So not only do I represent the pay community, I represent, and I sit here for the PSAC, representing over 130,000 people who deserve to be paid every 2 weeks for service provided. It's a basic employment standard rule. And so we work very close with our pay and compensation community, and they tell us what the problems are. And we appreciate that support. We have developed a very good working relationship with Madame Lemay and her staff. We take issues to her, we take crisis issues to her, and we get calls every day. And I know Debbie will speak to her issues. I get issues from people who are going to food banks, who've extended their credit cards, who can't pay their rents, who can't pay their child care providers. And so we are absolutely in a crisis situation here from the human factor perspective. Our members of the Pay Center are under immense pressure because not only do they have to process pay, but sometimes on a daily basis they have to tell people, I'm not paying you this week. This is a pay week, but you're not scheduled to be paid. We don't have it. We haven't been able to process your pay. And that is a terrible situation to put a new compensation advisor in to tell somebody there's no pay this week. We repeatedly brought this to the employer's attention that we were concerned. We were concerned from what our members were telling us in Miramichi that they were not going to be able to deliver pay. When you go from 2,700 compensation advisors who have more than 10 and 20 years experience, and you drop it to 400 new hires, a lot of them new to government, that's an unrealistic expectation for something as complicated as pay. The training needs were never met. Initially, a new hire in Miramichi was given an 18-month learning plan. After 2 years, it was dropped to 12 months. Too short a window. because they would take training in the morning and would be online and on the phones in the afternoon. So it wasn't consistent training. Pilot testing we were concerned about. I've heard this today. We were very concerned that pilot testing wasn't done, cross-section of risk pays. 30% of the pay administration is complicated, whether it's ship's crews, whether it's high voltage workers, whether it's people in Parks Canada students. Pay administration is complicated. We asked for that second rollout to slow down, and we reported the problems. But we weren't listened to, and the problems escalated. We now know through all the lessons learned that through the training and through the testing, we couldn't rely on the technology. The technology was failing. We had pay administrators in Miramichi who couldn't get answers. They had no one to get answers to when they were trying to input pay, and nobody could tell them. They were so creative that they were creating their own sheets. And when a pay administrator would figure out how to solve a problem, they would huddle. They'd bring everybody over to the desk, and they'd write little cheat cards, and they would share them with each other and say, here's how you solve this pay problem. They became very, very self-sufficient. I don't believe that was the intent. We're always open to discussions, and we've proposed many, many, many recommendations going forward. The bottom line is it has to be fixed. People have to be paid. There's no question about it. That's a reasonable expectation. The adverse effects to these new compensation communities has just been overwhelming. There are 40 new people that were hired in January in Miramichi, but there are 40 new people off the street that do not have compensation experience. You have to have experience to do compensation. We have reached out to the retired community. We supported the department to try and encourage these people to come back. But there are people who are offended and felt they were dismissed rather quickly and rather cursely and don't feel the commitment. So we've reached out and pleaded with them as well that there's 300,000 people that need to be paid, and we're begging for your support. We understand your disappointment and frustration with your former employer, but we're going to ask for your support. We don't, and my expertise is not technology, I'll let Debbie speak to that area from a shared services perspective, but we did not feel that the appropriate project management over the technology and the rollout of Miramichi was there. It takes experts and takes years to manage this kind of project, and we were very, very concerned about it, and we voiced our concern at every turn. So we find ourselves here today, and it was a very exciting experience for us to sit and listen to. I know Debbie and I both share concerns. The bottom line is we will do whatever is necessary to ensure our members get paid and that the Miramichi people who have worked so very, very hard are respected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madame Davio, please.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by also thanking the committee for the opportunity to testify today on what has become probably the single most important and pressing issue facing our members today. And I don't take that lightly, given that we are also in a crucial round of collective bargaining as we speak. I'm here representing the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada. We have over 50,000 public service professionals working in departments and agencies across the public service. These are doctors, nurses, scientists, researchers, informatics, etc. As you are all aware, serious problems persist within the government's Phoenix pay system, and many PIPS members continue to go without pay or are missing significant parts of their pay. Despite recognition of the problem by senior officials and an apology from the government, we remain without a solution and with no clear timeline for individual and collective remedies. PIPS has been sounding the alarm. You asked that question earlier. PIPS has been sounding the alarm since early in April, which is, some months after PSAC started sounding the alarm. We did ask, we met with Ms. LeMay prior to the Wave 2, and we did also request that transformation be delayed until at least, at a minimum, the problems that arose out of the first wave were rectified. We were told at that time that that was not in the cards, that they were unwilling to not flip the switch on the second wave and that it was imminent, but that they had assured us that they had gone through the problems that were raised in Wave 1, and many of those, almost all of those, had now been resolved. That unfortunately was not the case. So we have some 400 cases that are formal cases. That means people who contacted their union to file a complaint because they no longer took it on goodwill that they were going to be paid. Many of those are actually from phase 1 still, so from February. And we are now seeing in the last couple of weeks new pay issues arising, which is of particular concern. So we're not just talking about the ones that existed when we first implemented the system, but as we are fixing the system in some areas, it is creating new problems in other areas. And the problems continue to add up. We've had northern nurses, where recruitment and retention is already an issue, quit over their pay problems. They're a group of particularly hard hit because they work irregular hours, shift work, and rely on overtime for a significant portion of their pay. And this is an area already suffering from lack of good healthcare services in the north. We've heard many stories of new parents returning back to work and going without pay for months as they struggle to cover childcare and housing costs. Students so hard hit that managers are pooling money together to help them with their groceries. I was at a meeting recently in Alberta, and a spouse of one of my members asked why employees were still going to work without pay. He noted as a small business owner that his employees would not show up if they weren't paid. With passion, another one of my members, a nurse practitioner, got up and explained that they continue to do their work regardless of the pay because they believe in the work and that they're loyal to Canadians and to the service that they provide to them. The federal government shouldn't be taking advantage of the dedication and the hard work of federal public servants. We need to fix this problem. From members that have contacted our national union, we currently have 360 cases, 138 of which are critical. What's a critical case? A person who receives zero pay or doesn't receive enough pay to make ends meet. This doesn't always capture all the individuals who are facing this problem. This is just the number of people we know about. And we know from the government's own numbers that tens of thousands are affected. As a first step, we need to see immediate action to get emergency pay directly from departments and agencies. And if this is the only way to help those going for multiple pay periods without pay, then departments really have to get better and quicker at it. It seems to be a workable solution, except it's not working. Because of the continued problems with Phoenix and our desire to do something to help our members, the PIP's Board of Directors instituted a loan program for our members hardest hit. And we are now offering loans to our members way outside of our mandate to ensure that they can make ends meet. And we hope that we'll alleviate some of the genuine stress and harm being done to our members by this poorly executed transition to the new pay system. We've also written to the President of the Treasury Board and to the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, so when you ask, did she know about? Well, she ought to have known about. I know that both my union, my union and the other 17 federal public sector unions have been very vocal about describing not just that there are issues, but what those issues are, and even offering up solutions. So we're now working with the Treasury Board to establish concrete steps to ensure that our members are paid and compensated for additional financial penalties, and yet people from February are still not being paid. And we're sending these urgent cases directly to the Treasury Board Secretariat, but we've yet to see very many of them resolved, and certainly not in the timely and effective way that Ms. LeMay seemed to characterize that they would now be taken care of. Many questions need to be asked and answered when it comes to solving this mess. And my top questions, for starters, that I'd like to put to the committee, because I believe my role here is more to ask questions than to answer them for you, are the following. The use of a commercial product, a so-called off-the-shelf product, appears to have not been adequately tested. I understand from reports that perhaps up to 16,000 records were tested. This is more than likely way too low a number for a system which in the past has been referred to as having more than 70,000 rules that may need to be applied. What was the testing protocol and timelines? Can we see reports and evidence of the testing processes? Because clearly the results are not reflective of what's actually going on. And is it possible to test 70,000 rules with only 16,000 records? Wouldn't it be difficult to test the interaction of all of those rules with each other with only 16,000 records? And was there a contingency in place if Phoenix failed? Because I think we can say that it's failing. And it seems doubtful right now, but can we go back to the old system, or are there other answers that we need to ensure that going forward we have a system that works? Our union's been raising concerns with outsourcing and contracting out as well of many public services. We've seen the use of outside contractors balloon, especially in the IT sector. We have evidence of other projects that are over budget and late, like the government's email transformation that was outsourced to Bell and CGI. To what extent was the testing and implementation of this transition outsourced to IBM or other companies when our members stand ready to do it? We would like to see this committee look seriously at these questions and continue to strive to find a solution so our trusted, hardworking public servants can be paid. I'm sure you can all agree that public servants should not be paying the price for the failures of the pay system. So we, PIPS, remains at your disposal, both the government and this committee, in identifying the issues and the accompanying solutions. And anything we can do to get money into our members' pockets for their loyal service is not too much work for us, including bringing me off my vacation to come and report to this committee. So I remain available to you, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
And thank you both for your statements. We'll start with Madame Ratanzi.
Thank you both for being here, and we appreciate your presence here. And I have a question for you, because we all of us, as we have been discussing, we find it unacceptable that any person does not get paid. So my question to Madame is, in Miramichi, what is the morale of the staff? They must be facing a lot of negative press.
I will tell you that the morale in Miramichi is at its absolute lowest. Last night I received an email from one of our members in Miramichi who is so greatly depressed. She, in her email, she told me that they found an employee in the bathroom crying the other day. I shared that email last night at 10 o'clock with Deputy Minister, and I've asked that on-site mental health experts be brought in to support the workers in Miramichi, not a 24-hour EAP officer on a phone. We need on-site mental health to support these people. They're carrying the weight of the entire federal public service on their shoulders. So to your point, yes.
Thank you very much, because we were quite worried about this. We know that this is not only a financial issue, but it's also an emotional issue for people. In the July 14th, 2016 CBC article, the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister who was here, Rosanna DePaulo, testified before the committee that and who testified today before the committee, said that the system is functioning as designed and that they had tested the system inside out. Do you agree with it?
If the question's to me, absolutely not. I happen to come from an informatics background, and as I mentioned, you can't test over 70,000 rules on an off-the-shelf product that you've configured for an you can't even find a comparison to this kind of project, but a system that has to manage over 300,000 pay files definitely needed more than a little bit of testing. And when they came to that conclusion that on the 16,000 that they tested, they weren't ready, they should never have moved forward. So in my view, this was about saving money and not about necessarily modernizing or improving the pay system. And I have to admit, I got irritated when I heard from the Deputy Minister, who, by the way, we are also working together very well with. So I want to be clear that departmental officials have worked openly with us to try to resolve. I got irritated when she said that the whole justification or goal behind the modernization of the pay system was to ensure its sustainability. And, you know, from my perspective, you had 300,000 public servants who were being paid correctly before the transformation, and now you have 80,000 of those public servants who are not being paid correctly. Clearly, this solution did not meet the needs of the project. So.
And I appreciate your input, and I appreciate why the Deputy Minister does what the Deputy Minister does, because as career public servants, they have to go with what the previous government, they are at a loss themselves. The previous government did not listen to any input from you guys. The system has come into place. You have sunken costs of $310 million. and you've got a system that is being told that it is ready, what is one supposed to do? So I appreciate that. I understand that the Deputy Minister and the Minister visited the Miramichi Pay Center yesterday. What sort of feedback do you have?
So I was very interested in that feedback. I will tell you they were very encouraged and they were very appreciative of the minister's appearance and the deputy minister's appearance. The minister was very clear with them that she understands they're under immense pressure. She understands they have a very difficult job to do. I don't believe that there was any solutions provided to them. I know that they were most anxious to have options and possible options presented to them. They were not forthcoming, but they did appreciate the conversation and the fact that the minister and the deputy took the time to come and to meet with them. So yes.
So I hope collectively we will find solutions, because we are here today because we want to resolve the issue. The past is the past. Now we need to move forward. Okay.
Polly.
Mr. Tanzi, thanks for joining us today. I certainly appreciate your heartfelt comments. I mean, I can certainly see that you are, you're feeling every bit of what your team is feeling in Miramichi and throughout, so thank you very much. Some very quick questions for you. You've sat in and you heard earlier today, how comfortable are you with what's been proposed, what's been discussed today going forward? Knowing we're not going to go back to the old system, and the old system could have died any second, in which case there'd be no pay for months, but
leaving aside the original decision to go here in the first place, because what's done is done, and it's created a disaster, but I don't think anyone wants to focus on the past, right? But
are you?
But leaving aside that, we feel as though the government has been taking progressive steps towards fixing this issue. But nonetheless, with all of those steps, the addition of resources in Miramichi, the creation of the temporary pay centers and the call center, the additional training, the bringing in of the Phoenix people on the ground, the deputy minister and the minister visiting the Miramichi Pay Center, all that's great. The web form, it all sounds great. But at the end of the day, people are still not getting paid. So what do I have to say to that is it's obviously not enough, or it's not the right solutions, because it is not producing pay for public servants.
Okay, I'll take that as a low level of confidence. Ms. Lackey?
Further to that point, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've spoken to members of the former compensation community to ask them to give consideration to coming back to support. They are angry, they're irritated, they feel that they were disregarded, they gave plenty of warning to the department that this was not going to be a success. We've seen that demonstrated now, that to bring people in new off the street and to introduce a very complicated, untested software program positioned for failure, or definitely for struggles. And so those people who are administering pay are the ones who are dealing on the front lines with having to deliver a product that's not appropriate.
Okay. I can't recall, one of you mentioned I think it was 400 or 440 outstanding grievances. That's
just for my membership.
You've said a lot were from wave one. Were those formalized as grievances back then? And because part of the issue that we're struggling with is, for so long we've heard it's just 77 issues. Then we hear today from the deputy minister, well, those 77 came through. Those were only the ones that came through this one area. Like, did no one communicate all these others?
Honestly, when that figure came out, that 77, we had already filed more than 77 formal grievances just with PIPs. So I was astounded. I couldn't figure out where that number came from. Like, it just seemed...
Well, we found out today that it was one of the ones reported through a certain area, not through all the others. And that's what we've been trying to get at for quite a while.
At that point, we had over 150 critical cases and over 300 total cases. So.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Lackey, you had mentioned you met with the government several times. We heard earlier starting early April, I think. Is that the same timeline when you started meeting, expressing some of your worries about the way the implementation was proceeding?
Well, actually, no. Since 2011, we've been meeting with the department and discussing. We've been part of a union consultation committee going forward as each wave 1, 2, and 3, as people were hired and went through their training process. So we've been involved since 2011 in a consultative relationship. But then when we got to wave 2 and wave 3 in particular, when files started to be transferred, our members were calling us saying, we're not ready. We're forced to work overtime. We have to do mandatory overtime. We simply are
These
not
ones
ready.
and those were communicated?
That's correct. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so the April meeting that Ms. LeMay referred to was a meeting between the president of the PSAC and myself and the national executive vice president of PSAC. And we were there representing all of the unions with these issues. We presented issues, they presented solutions, but those solutions are not producing pay still today.
We heard today the priority 1, 2, and 3, and I agree the priority 1 have got to be the ones that we haven't paid, period. Are you comfortable with how we've got it, we, the government, where we priorities 1, 2, 3 set up, that within X amount of hours this person be contacted, et cetera, or?
I don't think it's fast enough, by the way, and we
it's
don't see
never gonna
those
be fast
timelines
enough.
being respected. But for sure, priority 1 is people who aren't being paid. But let me give you an example of somebody who might fall into priority 3, but is critical. A nurse working part-time in the north, where they had troubles recruiting and retaining, and they have a part-time nurse who they rely on to work overtime, for example. And that nurse relies on her overtime pay in order to pay her mortgage or whatever the case may be. That person would not be considered a priority necessarily in that system, but is definitely a priority because we're now going to lose that critical public servant in that area because they're not being paid. So,
have you had a chance to share that information?
Yeah.
On the set? Okay.
So we
You've
have
answered
put
my
all
question
our critical
perfectly, by the way.
cases forward. Yeah.
Perfectly. Thanks.
Thank you. I really want to express my appreciation to our 2 witnesses for appearing before this committee on short notice. I first found out about problems with the Phoenix pay system when employees of the RCMP depot in Regina contacted my constituency office about not being paid properly. So it's extremely important that we're hearing from representatives of the Canadians who are delivering different types of public services all across the country. So thanks for coming. Now, someone else who's in Ottawa but not appearing today is the Minister of Public Service and Procurement herself. And while it's certainly a good thing that she went and met with employees at the Miramichi Pay Centre, presumably it would also be important for her to address the 80,000 federal employees who have not been paid correctly. So I wonder if you have any comment on that.
I have written to Minister Foote on a number of occasions now, not just about pay, but at least 2 times specifically related to pay, and that has produced meetings with other officials, including Minister Bryson, the President of the Treasury Board, but I've yet to have an opportunity to meet directly with Minister Foote about these issues.
Same situation. I have written to the minister, and I've been forced to meet with other departmental heads as well, but we would like that opportunity to speak with her, to talk about those 80,000 people and the reasonableness of and the explanations that we could possibly give these people for not being paid. I agree with you.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're not alone in having difficulty meeting with the minister then. I wonder if you could comment perhaps on the argument that we heard from the deputy minister that it made sense to go ahead with phase 2 of Phoenix and that the risks of doing it were less than the risks of not doing it.
I don't know if you heard me, I very impolitely snickered out loud when they said that because I couldn't understand how there we were saying we know today of X number of problems that exist as a result of wave 1. Can we get a commitment from you to at least correct those X number of problems before you put another 170,000 people back into the system? And they said no, that they just were unwilling to slow down or take their time or rethink it. And that's unfortunate because we thought there's a perfect opportunity there to take a step back and make sure you're doing it right. And I just think it's ridiculous to say that you're doing it in order to ensure the sustainability of people's pay when in fact the problem they created through this transformation was the very problem they claim to want to have corrected. And to be frank, the old pay system was not perfect, that's for sure, which is why we were working to try to modernize it. But people were being paid. Most people were being paid regularly and could expect the right amount and could access that information through their pay stub and would have all the appropriate employment information they needed at their fingertips, and that's not the case today. So.
I met with the Deputy Minister about the last wave of transfer, 170,000 files, and I asked her to ease up. We weren't asking them to stop the process, but just extending it another 6 months, allowing our compensation advisors and the new ones that were hired in January an opportunity to become much more well-versed in the system, to be able to address the anomalies, the pay anomalies, and allow Phoenix and IBM an opportunity to fix the system.
Thanks. Now, you mentioned that your members are still working despite not being paid for months in some cases. You know, I think all members of this committee would really salute the dedication of public servants to continue delivering these important services despite not being paid. But I did want to ask whether, in your judgment, the Phoenix boondoggle has negatively affected the delivery of public services.
How could it not impact on employees' morale? I mean, really, I mentioned at the outset of my testimony that we're also in the middle of a difficult round of collective bargaining, but we were ready to sit with this government and work our way through it. But now you have this large number of people who feel so disrespected that nobody even cares if they get paid. And yet, as I say, they go to work every day. I don't know of a single person who doesn't show up to work as a result of this problem, except for the two that I know of who have actually resigned their jobs in the public service because they could no longer afford to keep their jobs.
So I'm not aware of any members who've resigned either and who would blame them, but there's other things tied to this. Their pensions are tied to this. Their health care benefits are tied to this. So this isn't just about a paycheck. It's not as simple as walking away and going down the street and getting another job. They've vested a lot of their career and their time, and they're also very proud to be working for the Government of Canada. So every day they hope they're going to go to work or they're going to log on to their bank account and find that check in there. So they're optimistic, and I respect them for what they've done.
Now, Ms. Davio, you asked some very pertinent questions about the lack of testing of the Phoenix system. I wonder, though, if you have any more general observations about the advisability of trying to use off-the-shelf software as a replacement for what is a very complex set of federal payroll systems.
I'm not opposed to the choice to use an off-the-shelf product. I'm definitely opposed to the lack of time and planning and appropriate considerations that went into whether or not it was actually a value for money exercise, whether or not it was actually going to fix the problems that they were hoping to fix, and most specifically, if they came to the conclusion that it was, that they needed to ensure that that system was going to work, or at least, or at the very least, as new issues arose, they would be in a position to triage and correct them overnight, you know, so that you wouldn't have people in this predicament. But as I say, I now have members who are about 6 months without pay, and of course, nobody can survive 6 months without pay. They're passing the hat at the office. As Donna said, they're at the food bank. They're maxing out their lines of credits. They're taking second mortgages, and all of these things are going to impact on their future ability to access credit. So this is a problem that's going to keep on compounding itself the longer it goes on, and quite frankly, I'm just hoping that the Prime Minister pulls out his checkbook and starts paying these people so that we can get on with the work we need to do for the Canadian public.
Thank you.
Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for coming. This situation is completely unacceptable, and I agree with my colleagues on the other side that some of the information surrounding the rollout seems to be conflicting. I know myself, I'd had almost 70 complaints received in my office with respect to, now they weren't formal complaints through some formal system, but it was union members reaching out to try to get help with back pay which was substantial. I think I have a better understanding today what the plan is regarding trying to resolve some of the issues. We have 3 working days for people who aren't receiving any pay. We'll see if that pans out at the next pay period on the 10th. We have priority 2, which is employees with pay at risk of disruption due to maternity leave, 4 to 6 weeks. I'm not sure how that compares to prior, under the prior system, what the timelines. We're hearing 8 to 12 weeks for those types of extraneous pay, so that seems to be a slight improvement. Then I look at the priority 3, and this is where I perhaps share some of Mr. McCauley's and Ms. Davio's concerns. Many of the people on this list, it seems to me, would be perhaps in the same precarious situation as the people who are in priority 1. Is there a working group that you're part of regarding the management of this system that could help identify some of these?
I think we're all hoping that the government stands up, a committee of sorts, so that there is an opportunity for us to work together to both identify and resolve the problems. But so far, other than a few meetings, between the PSAC and Marie Lemay, we're really not.
I think that would be a helpful suggestion if union and management could sit down at the table and work more proactively. Maybe others will have questions on that. I wanted to actually sort of get back to one of the mechanisms that the minister announced that didn't get a lot of time in the discussion today, and this is the appropriate process for emergency pay. Right at the outset of this crisis, the minister announced that departments should cut checks for emergency pay to employees, and then they could sort out the back pay or too much pay or not enough pay later as the system got fixed. What has happened with that, what was meant to be the immediate fix? It was announced back in April. Has it not worked? Have you tried to use it? Because you talked about loans, and I'm like, no, if somebody doesn't get the pay, this is go to their department, not to Treasury Board, not to PSC, but to go to their department and say, give me my emergency pay. The minister told you to do it.
Yeah.
What
so
happened
there are mechanisms for giving emergency pay. There's both emergency pay and priority pay, both of which should produce a paycheck within 48 hours. So your guess is as good as mine as to why exactly that system doesn't work. But what we did see was people, jumping through all the fiery hoops and filling out the forms and talking to their management and right up to their director, and then this getting sent off to the Treasury Board and the whole thing getting approved, and they would get cut an emergency paycheck, and in the very next pay cycle, Phoenix would take it back from them, and now they would owe the government that emergency paycheck.
How did they manage?
So they didn't find themselves any better off. In some cases, we also heard departments like in Health Canada, they had widespread issues. We heard cases where the bureaucracy was telling us they just didn't have the resources to process emergency and priority pays anymore, that they didn't have enough people to determine who was missing what, so therefore they could not remedy the problem.
Well, maybe this is a bit leading, but based on the feedback you're hearing from your members, is it clear to them what they need to do when they're not being paid, or is there a communications problem here as well?
There's a communications problem, and you also have to remember there's many people who won't surface. There are people who are concerned about their jobs and traditionally keep quiet and will endure this situation. So the numbers of 80,000 could, in fact, be higher than that. So what's happening is people are cautious and concerned and embarrassed to go to their manager supervisor to ask for a salary advance. And a lot of times when they get these salary advances, to what Debbie's saying, and 2 or 3 days later Phoenix pays them, now they're in an overpaid status, and the next pay cycle they do 100% recovery off their pay. So they get no pay on the next pay. So it actually creates a new problem by paying them.
They really needed a way to triage the new issues as they arose and to be able to get pay in people's pockets faster. But we asked for that notice to go out. Marie respected that, sent it out because we, the unions, asked for it. But again, the notices that go out to employees are long, convoluted, complex, with a number of links to a number of different sites. So you have to fill out this form and you have to contact this person, then you have to be in contact with Miramichi, and in all of that, nowhere does it say you might want to contact your union rep who can help walk you through this. But nonetheless, as people realize that they've been waiting patiently and now we're this many months into it and they're still not getting paid, we are now starting to see a big influx of people filing formal cases because they don't see any other solution.
Well, we can fix the problems we learn about, hopefully. I'll share the rest of my time with Mr. Gerritsen.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
About 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess the one thing I wanted to just clarify, and when the department officials were here, my interpretation of what they said is that you sounded the alarm but by that point it was too late. Too much had already been rolled in. Is that fair? Because you said something different. You said you told them not to, but then they still went ahead with it.
I'm going to refer to Donna on this because PSAC was in this much earlier than we were back in 2011 as we're starting to move over saying, whoa, wait a minute. And certainly after wave 1 happened, that was the point at which we realized everything they'd been telling us up to that point was
that what they said is inaccurate, that there was time to turn it around?
I'm not going to say whether they had time to turn it around, but they had time to slow it down and be much more respectful in their timelines and much more reasonable in their rollout of the training programs. The problem was we didn't have the human resources to support what they were trying to do. And so we were just asking for time.
Okay, thank you.
Same with us. Fix the problems first, then go to wave 2.
Thank you. My other question has to do with what we do moving forward. So we've had a lot of discussion about why the program was broken and this and that. And so I asked the officials a question. I said, do you need more resources? What resources do you need? That was followed up by some of my colleagues. We were told that the minister already said, use all the resources you need in order to get this problem fixed as quickly as possible. Can you offer a suggestion as to what more, on top of that statement, which seems carte blanche to do anything you want, can be done?
After the fact, I mean, they needed to plan better and they needed to do better training and all of these things, and I think they still need to do those things.
But my question is, how do we get the money into the bank accounts of the people who deserve it faster than what they're proposing?
I know it sounds ridiculous, but seriously, somebody has to have the authority to whip out a checkbook and cut checks, like manually, because clearly the system isn't working. So if I'm a manager and I've got employee A and I know employee A isn't being paid and I know around what employee A gets paid, I should have the authority to get them a check, and I don't. So that's the problem.
That's a good answer. Thank you.
I would think that those 2,700 people out there that have 30-plus years experience as compensation advisors who could walk in tomorrow, 2,700 people, and help solve this problem from a resource perspective, there needs to be a national apology to these people for their dismissals.
Begging them to come back, and they're reluctant to do that.
But it shouldn't come from me.
I know. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, I only have 2 others in my list for questions, although I suspect Mr. Mayor, we may want another one. I have Mr. Shields on my list, but Mr. McCauley, I understand you're taking the question?
Sorry, I don't have a question. I do have a motion I'd like to put forward that, as Mr. Whalen says, that given the conflicting information being presented to the Standing Committee for OGGO, that Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates shall conduct a full study of the Phoenix pay system, that the Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada appear before the committee no later than August 5th, 2016, and that the meeting be televised.
From a procedural standpoint, Mr. McCauley, I'm going to have to rule that out of order, and I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you what needs to be done. We had already defeated a motion calling for the minister to come on, hear me out, on August the 5th. If your motion merely said to rescind the earlier decision, that would be ruled in order. But your motion now is substantively the same as the original motion that was defeated. So from a procedural standpoint, that is out of order. If you wish to reword your motion, calling upon a motion to rescind the earlier vote, we can vote on that and see how the committee deals with it. But simply to bring forward the motion as you've worded it would be considered to be out of order, in my opinion. Mr. Weir.
Well, perhaps to expedite things, it strikes me that we do have a motion on the order paper that I presented, but that we have not yet discussed, which does not tie the minister's appearance to a deadline of August 5th, and I wonder if we could perhaps consider that motion.
Well, Mr. McCauley has the floor right now, so the motion you haven't noticed. I'll certainly take that under advisement. However, your motion dealt with the minister appearing, representatives from the union appearing, which we have now, and also, I believe, employees. So, again, I'm strictly talking from a procedural perspective. Yes, Mr. Ayoub first, then we'll go back to Mr. McCauley.
I just want to maybe, I don't know every single rules that we need to follow, but I'm sure that we've got 2 witnesses here to answer questions, if we may. I think that kinds of things are procedural. Maybe we can do that further after in camera or whatever, and go back with the the witness.
The
You know?
Well, again, Mr. McCauley is well within his right to bring forward a motion when he's been recognized, when he has the floor. He's done that. I'm ruling that the wording of the motion is out of order.
You did get, so you got the answer.
Asking for not just the minister to appear, but it's to conduct the full study of the pay system and for the minister to appear.
Mr. Chair,
Previous one was not that.
I think the government is already doing a study, is conducting the study, and therefore Mr. McCauley's motion is really out of order.
Well, I don't know.
To my understanding, that the government is conducting the study.
To my knowledge, I don't know who is conducting that study. This committee is not. This is just an examination. I will have to consult with my clerk, but the point is that if your motion was simply to rescind the vote of the earlier motion, that would be completely in order, right? So if that is the only point that you have in your, now that I recognize you, let me take some time to consult with my clerk. Sure. Okay. For about 2 or 3 minutes, hopefully no more than that. And I apologize to our 2 witnesses who have been sitting very patiently for close to 2 hours before appearing at the table while we deal with this procedural matter. Mr. McCauley, I believe you have a revision of the wording of your motion?
Yes, sorry. Thank you for your patience. Or I'm revising that the Standing Committee of Government Operations and Estimates shall conduct a full study of the Phoenix pay system. Period.
All right, we have a motion. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion?
That sounds pretty similar to the motion that Mr. Weir had on, subject to slightly different wording.
Well, we have not. Mr. Weir's motion is on notice, but he hasn't spoken to it, hasn't introduced it, which has to be done from a procedural standpoint. The only time you can introduce it is when you have the floor. Mr. McCauley has the floor now. At least he's been recognized. That's why he's introducing this motion. Okay? All the arcane procedural sort of things that we live by here. So we have a motion. I see. Do we have another speaker?
No, I just need clarification. So you're just presenting that motion and then letting the subcommittee decide the dates of the study? Because we're in the middle of...
If we're agreeing on the study, then yes.
Okay, so because we will be in the middle of Canada Post and everything else.
So the motion is clearly, the motion for committee members is simply, do we agree as a committee, if we agree with the motion, to conduct a study? What we've done today is an examination or briefing, however you wish to call it. A study, of course, is far more extensive than that. It can entail several other meetings, delving into many other areas. That is the essence of the motion put forward by Mr. McCauley. Okay? So.
Sorry. Before August 5. To do the study by August 5.
So to conduct a study, conduct and complete a study before August the 5th?
it begins before August 5. I'm sorry, we have miscommunication on our side. That was started by August 5.
Commence the study no later than August the 5th.
Yes, my apologies.
All right, the question then is that this committee agrees to commence a study on the Phoenix pay system prior to August the 5th. I'll call a question on that. All in favor? All opposed? Motion defeated. Now, I think, unfortunately, that took up the 5 minutes, and I have Mr. Drouin next on my list.
No, I'll pass. My colleagues answered my questions for me, so I'm okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Weir, did you have a question?
Well, sure. Since we've devolved into committee business, I think I will use my time just to introduce the motion that I already have on the order paper. I'm happy to read the motion if that's useful to the committee.
Procedurally, you will have to introduce the motion, and you can do that now.
Sure. So the committee study the Phoenix pay system and invite witnesses, including the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, the Deputy Minister of Public Services and Procurement, federal employees who have not been paid correctly, and their union representatives.
All right. I will suspend for about 2 minutes just to confer with my clerk to make sure that this is procedurally in order, and then we'll either go to commentary or straight to the vote. We'll suspend for 2 minutes. Anyone wishing to speak to the motion? Mr. Weir, it's fairly self-evident.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. Essentially, it's calling for a more fulsome study of the Phoenix pay debacle. We've had a good meeting here today, but I think we definitely need to look at other issues and hear from more witnesses.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I will call a question. All in favor of the motion?
That's fine.
All opposed? I'm sorry, all opposed? So I'm sorry, I didn't catch any vote. All in favor of Mr. Weir's motion? All right, carried. Thank you. Now, I'm sorry, Madame Davio.
It just begged the committee's indulgence for one more minute, despite you not asking me a question. So great that you're going to study it, but I think Donna and I both had the same question, like, to what end? Because what we're after is, number one, getting our members paid, and then number two, going forward with a system that works. But just if... and maybe that wouldn't normally be defined at this phase, but just, if the committee could make sure that it's turning its mind to the very serious questions of how do we get money into the people's pockets today as a number one priority, and only secondarily what went wrong and how do we fix it for the future, if you will, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sir, I know you're both well aware of how committees work, and now that we've agreed to commission a study, there will be a report that will be tabled in the House of Commons once the study has been completed. I would assume that members here during that study would like to be able to recommend solutions or some remedies. Also, they have the ability, of course, to call witnesses forward to assist in developing said remedies. I'm sure you will be back before this committee in the very near future, having said that. All right, now, if I'm reading the table correctly, since we've dealt with that, are there any other speakers?
Question.
Pardon me?
I just had the single question.
Certainly.
Ladies, again, thank you for bearing with us and your patience. Going forward, how close a communication, like who's the front person within your organizations with the government when these things are coming up? We're meeting with the unions often, which is great, et cetera, but it sounds like you're still hearing issues that the government is not hearing. What mechanisms has been set up that you see for communicating those issues that you're hearing about, that the government side's not hearing about, so that we can get the people paid faster and get these problems solved?
So Marie LeMay mentioned that she had set up, an address of one gathering place where we could send these issues to. Those are overarching issues, not individual issues. Right. On individual cases, after some months of people not being paid, we went and asked for another solution. Yeah. We're sending our cases directly to the Secretary of the Treasury Board, who is then sharing those cases with various deputy ministers, which one would think would give it the kind of urgency and priority it needed to be resolved, but our experience thus far, unfortunately, does not see those cases being resolved necessarily more timely than any other case. So,
okay. So that's something to take with us.
The opposite example, I do have the ability to reach into the PSPC, into the Accounting, Banking and Compensation branch to resolve ours on a case-by-case basis. We have been relatively successful in addressing each one of our members' cases and plights as they present them to us. So we have been able to move those issues forward on behalf of PSAC. Some of them are much more complicated. Disability management cases, for example, are very complicated. People who are going off on Sun Life and long-term sick leave are very complicated. So they take longer to do, but we do have points of contact for addressing each one of our cases within the PSAC.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no more question, I will entertain I'm sorry, Mr. Weir.
Well, just given, that our witnesses were very patient this afternoon, and given that we did interrupt their testimony with some committee business, I would just ask whether either has anything to add.
No, like I say, we just want to get our members paid. We're willing to do anything. We're willing to help out in whatever way, to give of ourselves in any way that we can help. And so we're really pleased that the committee is also very serious about getting us through to a resolution. So thank you so much for the time.
As well, this has been an opportunity for us to bring our members' issues before this committee. This has been a very, very serious problem, as you can appreciate. This is mission critical for us, getting people paid and representing these people who turn to us almost as a last resort when they can't deal with their employer. So we appreciate this opportunity. We will continue to work with the departments to ensure the pay is done timely. And we are a stakeholder in this process. We support the pay transformation, and we'll do whatever we can to get them paid.
Thank you very much, Madame Devio and Madame Lackey. Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I had mentioned at the outset that I wanted 5 minutes for committee business. However, I know that many of you have planes to catch. It would be an update on some of the future studies which we have agreed to. I've asked the clerk, however, rather than take more of your precious time, to give email updates, and one will be coming out no later than Monday of next week, giving you a status update of what's happening come this fall. All right? I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. I don't think we need a seconder for that? No. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. I know I said this about a month and a half ago, but once again, have a great summer.